7:02 p.m. This open meeting of the Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted both remotely and in person, consistent with the temporary provisions of the open meeting law extending remote meeting protocols through March 31st, 2027. This meeting is convening via Zoom video conference and in person as posted on the meeting agenda, which can be found on the Town of Grafton website. Please see the meeting agenda for details on how to participate remotely. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. All participation within this meeting will be visible to others. If you screen share, please be aware that that will be recorded and may be viewed later. This meeting may feature public comment. For anyone attending virtually, if you'd like to request an acknowledgement to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. Anyone that's just on the phone, our administrator will coordinate to give you the ability to speak. Anyone in person, we ask you to step up to the podium to speak, and anyone that speaks tonight, please state your name and address prior to any comments. And any votes taken this evening will be done based on a roll call vote. So the first item on the agenda is Snow Road, so I'm just going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair McCusker.
Thank you. Snow Road applicant, you guys have the floor. Hello, guys, you're on.
Good evening. Thank you, John Grenier with James Grenier Associates. I'm here with Cohen Babcock, who is with the development team, and he turned his camera off. Steve Benicasio is on Zoom, so he's present as well. Since our last hearing, we had submitted some traffic information, some responses to Tech Engineering, and
They can't hear online, sorry. On Zoom. Because I could hear out there on that TV, but on Zoom it's saying they can't hear.
Thank you.
okay, so
Excuse me.
email will go a little closer to the microphone. And we received, I believe the day before yesterday, responses from Tech, from Ali Corazani, aka Associates, their responses. So we spoke with our traffic engineer actually earlier today. He hasn't had time to formally provide a response, but in general, looking through the comments from Tech, we really don't have any issues with their comments. I would say that the biggest item is the intersection of Snow Road and 122, and that was touched on in Tech's review, where I believe somebody from Tech, he's here now. I don't want to speak for him, and I'm sure he can correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest design improvement that needs to be done is to provide a dedicated right turn lane from Snow Road onto 122. And that we're in agreement with that. We have no issue with doing that. And we are more than willing to provide the design and have that reviewed and approved as part of this process. The other item that was brought up by Tech is along 122 heading south to the potential to have a left turn lane from 122 onto Snow Road. And we're not opposed to that either. That would have to get reviewed. As you know, 122 is a state road. That would have to get reviewed by DOT, and it would have to get their blessing. And in looking at it, I looked at it earlier today. It appears that the road width on 122, where you intersect with Snow Road, as well as when you go a little further south down to where the Stop and Shop Plaza is, I believe that the paved road width is about the same. It's just a matter of where the lane markings are, because there is a left turn lane that you can go into Stop and Shop Plaza at the light. And I looked on the breakdown lane in the area of the Stop and Shop Plaza. The breakdown lane is, I don't know if I had to guess, maybe 5 feet wide on the right-hand side. In front of Snow Road, the breakdown lane is much wider. So it may be a matter of making modifications to the striping in those areas. So either way, we'd be fine with that. Again, 122 is a state road. That would have to go through the process with DOT and have them, give it the A-OK. So that is really, in our opinion, that is the biggest item. All the other improvements, whether it's in the site, whether it's crosswalks or access, in the big picture, that's all window dressing. We can address that. We can make sure all that works for the site. In addition, we had provided an updated layout plan that we think makes improvements based on comments from the board. I don't know if you have it in your packets. If you don't, I have. Do you have it?
Stated February 14th.
Yes.
I think we have it.
I'm trying to see if I have
No,
it.
it's this date here.
Yes, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is the February 14th. So we provided this as an item of discussion where, again, we've tried to take in some of the comments from all parties, the board, comments from other consultants, and modify the plan. So in general, big picture, what we are proposing to do, and we think it makes sense, is to have some duplexes along Snow Road, townhouse style, and that is more in keeping with the neighborhood. Across the street, there's a multifamily. To the south of that, across the street, is Maxwell Drive. That's where the Housing Authority has some multifamily down there. So to have townhouse style duplexes along there makes sense. One, it is more in keeping with the neighborhood. Two, as you're going along Snow Road, it provides a visual buffer to the rest of the project. So when you're seeing townhouses, you can't see over the townhouses on Snow Road. And the only really viewway is where the access drive is, and you'll see the clubhouse, which again, that's a one-story building. Then moving into the site, originally on our previous rendition, we had two 64-unit buildings. In order to break up the massing of two big buildings, what we did was around that quad area, so to speak, we have 4 24-unit buildings. This allows us to have more landscape areas, break up the massing of the buildings, and soften it up in the middle portion of the site. And then moving to the rear of the site, which I believe is about from Snow Road to the buildings in the back, you're about 600 feet back. It's way back. We have 2 4-story buildings where we have the ability to have elevators in those buildings. So that would be something that would be beneficial to whether it's people who have mobility issues, handicapped people, elderly. So they have an elevator so that if someone's on the top floor, they're not going down multiple sets of steps. In addition, we'll note where we have building number 1, it's the one at the north northeast portion of the site in the back, you see that we have an access drive that goes around to the side of the building. We can work with the contours. Let me back up for 1 second. For the most part, this site is flat as a pancake. It drops off in that northeasterly corner. The grade drops off. So to work with those grades, we are able to have a driveway that would go down subterranean and have subsurface parking under that building. So now you have people, they can get into the elevator, under the building, into the parking garage, and that's covered parking, and it helps to beef up our parking count. So it serves multiple purposes, both working with the site, having covered parking for elderly or people with mobility issues, and then we can have elevators in those buildings. So it works on multiple fronts. Now, also getting back to grading, and it's not shown on here, but when we were laying this out, we kept this in the back of our mind. You will note that in one of our earlier renditions, we had townhouses all along that northerly property line, and they were relatively close to the property line. So we removed all of those units. Now we have 3 detached garage buildings, one 8-car, another 8-car, another 6-car. Off the back of those, we have approximately 40 feet to play with. In that area, and again, the grade drops off in that area and it continues to drop off to the northeast. One of the comments that Graves Engineering had was, we want to be able to, there's an area kind of on the northwesterly side where there's a depression. We want to be able to drain that. We don't want to have impoundment of water adjacent to some of the abutters that number 18 or 18 and a half, which are the abutters to there. So we can use that area to make sure that the site will drain to the east. And another item that we had talked about, I think it was at one of our first hearings, was about water quality. We can use that whole corridor heading into the northeast portion of the site to be able to have such items as water quality, swales, infiltration trenches, etc., so that we will not only meet our stormwater water quality, will exceed what the state requirements are. So we'd be well in excess of that. Now I know that's important to the board as well. And so these are the things that are, while we're laying it out, we're also saying, how can we make the site better? How can we make it function better? And what we would like to do is to have a conversation with the board to say, is this moving in the right direction? Is this something that the board feels comfortable with? And then we can get into the hard engineering, all of the drainage calcs, layout, utilities, etc., keeping in mind that we're going to be addressing all of these items that we've been talking about over the past few months. So that's kind of a view from 10,000 feet. I know that people have concerns, questions. I know that you have both your consulting engineers here. So with that, we'll put it to the board and hopefully try to answer any questions and have a good discussion.
So just to be crystal clear here, this proposal brings us down to 236 units total.
Correct. 236
12
units.
townhouses, 224 apartments.
Correct.
Okay. Comments or questions from the board? Quiet group.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
So I assume we'll probably spend the bulk of the meeting on traffic, so I'll start on non-traffic. I didn't see any lot coverage information on the revised plan. Obviously, it's a water supply overlay district. There have been some concerns raised about that. Just wondering, with the revisions, has there been any significant change in where you're landing for lot coverage?
I don't have that. It's
It's
reduced.
early, yeah.
It's reduced from what it was.
Okay.
What the specific number is.
At least we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, we're going in the right direction.
And then on parking, so I don't know if garages help you on the northern part of the site, with some of the drainage items that you talked through. But before changing those to garages, we had 76 parking spots up there. Now, with the garages and the open spaces, we're down to 51. So we lost 25 spots there. Obviously, we picked up considerable, 53 spots under building
Correct.
one. But, we'd have 25 more spots if those were still open spots on the top of the property and not garages.
You're correct. Oh, while we're talking about parking spaces, the other item, I know there was some concern with the townhouses that, again, people store things in their garage. They don't use that as a parking space. So, originally in one of the previous renditions, across from those, on both the left and right of the clubhouse, we had townhouses over there. We removed those townhouses. Now we have a total of 25 parking spaces across from the townhouses. So that allows for some overflow, for parking for the townhouses as well.
Yeah, and I think it helps, and obviously, feel free to shut me up at any point. As the number of townhouses comes down, I think that concern probably comes down a little bit, because it's just fewer townhouses to have that overflow. When I was thinking about it, I said, well, if we use the same logic that we had applied to some of the other garage spaces, that half of them might be used for something other than parking a car in. I said, well, with only 12 townhouses, we're only talking about maybe 6 cars of overflow using a quote-unquote apartment spot, instead of a townhouse spot. So, I'm still concerned about overall number of spaces. I think, with 224 apartment units and the board, based on past projects, preferring to get closer to 2, we'd be talking about 448 spaces. And with the half garage haircut, and counting 100% of the ones under building 1, we're at, if I take my 6 parking spot townhouse haircut, we're at 391. So we'd be about 57 spots shy of 2 per apartment unit. And I think the last question is on the garage, the garage units under building 1. Would the plan be for those to be open parking, or are those going to be reserved, rented separately? Have you decided?
We haven't,
Okay.
we haven't gotten to that yet, but, yeah, because we have 64 units, we have 53 spaces.
Yeah, and I think it's probably, I'm picturing an open layout.
It would be an
not
open
stalls.
layout, but that's not to say, you go in some parking garages, then they'll have all the spaces numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah. I'm just thinking somebody's probably not going to use that, even if they have to rent it for storage. Maybe, maybe not. And probably less likely. But if they are rentable as opposed to just open for anybody, you might have some that just go unused, unrented.
Right, right. And again, we haven't gotten that far,
Yep.
but if it was a matter of saying that's open, it goes with the building.
Sure. Yeah.
You rent in that building, the parking spaces are available to you.
I'm good for now.
So, I just want to clarify the, 25 spaces in front of the townhouses, that's included in the, 317 exterior spaces, right? So the plan identifies 317 exterior spaces, so I assume the 25 in front of the townhouses, not, across the street, across the driveway from the townhouses, is part of the 317.
That is part of the 317. So if you backed out, say if everybody in those townhouses, loads up their garages with, storage, and you want to have 2 parking spaces, so of the 25, you'd take away 12.
Yeah.
So 12 from that.
No, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Other comments from the board?
So, how many of those spaces are anticipated for the clubhouse then?
Well, the clubhouse, it's specifically for the clubhouse. I mean, and anybody can use the spaces anyway. Do you want to drive, if you're feeling lazy that day, you want to, go get your mail, hop in your car, go and park over, you know, to the left and right of the clubhouse, that's fine. You want to walk to the clubhouse, that's fine. If so it's not like there's any specific spaces dedicated specifically to the clubhouse.
I thought there were some initially.
Well, initially we did have some in one of the previous renditions. When you pull in from the center aisle, we had some parking spaces right in front of the clubhouse. And it was brought up that it is awkward, and we agree that it is awkward because people are pulling and pulling out. Then you're parked right in front of the clubhouse, then you're backing out. Well, it just makes for an awkward situation. So we removed any parking spaces that were directly in front of the clubhouse, so that when you're pulling in, there's no potential conflicts in that intersection.
So I just have kind of a bigger picture question. So we're starting to approach the 180-day date. We haven't seen any stormwater plans.
We did have stormwater plans with the initial submittal, and where with the more dense plan that was originally submitted, we can make the drainage work. We're paring the site down and pulling away, taking into account some of the comments, whether it was for increased stormwater treatment, etc. I mean, with every rendition, we could keep on running drainage calculations, running pipes, relaying. We could do all of that. We are feeling comfortable that with the less dense plan, as you see here, we can address all of those comments. It's a matter of really having a plan that the board is comfortable with, and then we can go through the I dotting, T crossing, stormwater plans, drainage plans, all the interior utilities. We feel very comfortable that we can address all of that once we get to a basic plan that the board feels comfortable with. And also, we're going to be back to design, the intersection of Snow Road and 122. We'll have a full set of engineered design plans for that intersection with the turn lane, etc. So we're trying to come to a good point with your board with what's this project going to look like. We did a design that was fully engineered with a denser design. Paring it back, we're very comfortable that we can accomplish all of the, whether it's stormwater, whether it's handicap ramps, whether it's interior walkways, etc. We can address all of those things, but we'd like to come to a good, comfortable location with the board with where we are with the overall layout. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
the rest of, I think my comments relate to traffic, so I'll punt on those.
Can you remind me what the original total was for units, and now that we're down to 236, what did we start with?
268.
I have two questions. One of the questions, I know we talked about like disposal and trash. Is the plan still to have it in that bottom right corner, or did you guys come up with something else?
The ideal spot, and we've talked about it internally with having trash compactors there. And this can be this is a good discussion because originally we had some dumpsters located around the site. I know we had one at the southwest corner closer to Snow Road, and it was near one of the abutting houses. So it was like, you don't necessarily want the trash truck banging a dumpster. So we're trying to reduce the locations of them, not just have an open dumpster, but have compactors. The area that seems to be the least impactful is on the southeast side. That's right behind Stop and Shop. And
So it hasn't changed. It's
so
still,
it hasn't changed. So what we're trying to accomplish, and aesthetically, to have dumpsters everywhere, it's so if we could have a more expensive trash compactor area, we know it's not necessary. People are gonna, have to go a little further to get rid of their trash, or we know of other developments that they do have a quote unquote like concierge type pickup, particularly for say the townhouses, etc. That can be done. So we're trying to balance having it be the least impactful, having it aesthetically look good, and what we're leaning towards is having, it costs. It's not cheap to have big trash compactor units, as opposed to renting a dumpster. It's mechanical. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, or over $100,000 for units like that. But that's the direction we'd like to go. But again, that can be a topic of discussion as well.
yeah, I think it would have been nice just to see an idea of what that looked like, just to have a secondary option. The only other question I had, I thought we talked about in the last meeting, was just designs around like pickup and drop off areas. Like, so for example, we talked about folks moving in and out, or Amazon coming through. I remember I used to live in the city, and we had kind of like a roundabout in front of our building, right? And that roundabout was temporary parking for folks. So my only concern is like if we're looking at both the 64 unit buildings in the back, Amazon or a moving truck comes right down that first lane, is that blocking the access for both sides? Does that make sense? Like, can a truck still park there and then another car get by that truck? And then the other thing to take into account, it's still blocking folks in because there's not enough space for.
Those are the driving aisles are 24 feet wide. So if someone's parked in front, whether it's the Amazon truck or someone's, getting DoorDash, and they pull up in front, you can get around them. You do have multiple driving aisles. So even if someone's there, you could, cut through one of in front of the buildings, we have those open areas where you can loop around. You can get out. If someone's blocking right in front of the building, you have that separate driving aisle that's closer to the interior quad, where you can use that driving aisle as well. So you're not pigeonholed. You do have, if someone takes up too much room and they sit in the middle of the driving aisle for whatever Amazon zips up, or whether it's UPS or whoever, and they're taking up, you're not stuck. You do have ways to reroute yourself in the parking area and get around.
So, a few comments. One, I just want to build a little bit of something Brian said. The garage is on the north side. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that they do protect those homes north of the project from things like headlights and whatnot. I should say, potentially. I'd have to really kind of take a closer look at how it lays out. But that is an advantage of having the garages along there, as opposed to just open stall parking. Possibly. So I don't want to lose sight of that. Look, we've commented before about the fact that this is really dense, and I've done a lot of thinking about that sense. And really, and I've kind of said this before, in my mind it comes down to a couple of things. One is, impact to the neighborhood. What's this actually look like? And at some point, we're going to need to see some drawings. I'd like to see something similar to what was done by the developer for the old highway barn here in town, as far as a visual going down the street, right? They started at the Common and went down 140, so you could see what this thing looked like. And I really would like to see what this looks like from 140, I mean, do we have some sort of monstrosities towering over the back of Stop and Shop, or are they not visible at all? And something similar along Snow Road, of course, as well. You know, I get what you're saying, that the townhouses are there to try to make it look better.
Right.
I'd like to see that.
Okay. And,
Right,
and
just so-
on that point, well, before I forget, what we would like to do, and this is tailored after, there was a project in Natick, and it looks really nice on your way if you're going down. I think it's 127. Is it 127 heading into Natick? 27 into Natick on the right hand side as you're heading into town. They have townhouses, similar type of approach. They have townhouses along 27. The front doors are on, in this case, the front doors would be along Snow Road. You're not looking at garages. You're not looking at someone's, off their kitchen, their deck that's floating out there. The front doors would be along Snow Road, and then the garages are interior. So when you're looking back, you see the nice townhouses. They have a nice walkway out to the sidewalk. They have it all landscaped up. There's no pavement. There's no parking. It's just all a nice vegetated landscape, and there's no decks. There's no, you see a nice front door. So that's, and to just quickly answer your question, we have talked to the architect about providing just such plans, and we're more than willing to do that, and we were trying to get a timeline for getting that done, so we're more than amenable to do that. So
So,
Go ahead.
Again, this all really ties into what the impact is to the neighborhood. Then if we talk about the apartment buildings, I assume when you say a 3-story building, that's 3 stories of living space and then a full roof on top of it?
yes,
So really, they're 4-story or possibly even more,
yes.
as far as the overall height.
You were talking about your other project
So,
with the roof.
yeah, so I think I know what you're even talking about, but, when we did Flint Pond, was that, yeah, no, is that what it, no, not Flint Pond.
Prentice, please.
Prentice Place,
Prentice
thank you.
Place. I knew what you
Did
meant.
Prentice Place, we encouraged them to basically sink the
Yeah.
roof down to the 3rd floor. So, yeah, you lose some space, you lose some units potentially, but it basically buries the 3rd floor in the roof line, so it's not as tall. And I would encourage you to kind of look into something like that to, again, minimize the impact, both of the 3 stories and the 4 stories for that matter.
Right.
I think those buildings turned out pretty good.
They did turn out.
They could have been, talking to the developer, the mechanicals on top of the building aren't the greatest, and, if he had that to do over again, he would.
Yeah, and
But I think you, up front, you can design that so it looks better.
I think I can add something to that. So right now we're going through design on another project, and what we're doing because of the condensers and the new energy codes, and you can't do package condensers anymore. We're doing a tubbed roof, so you basically lose about 6 or 8 feet off the top of the roof, and they tub it, and it goes down, and all your AC condensers are hidden,
Yeah.
and you keep a ridge line, and it looks like a traditional garden style, but it has a tubbed
Yeah.
roof and everything's in it,
So,
and it also reduces height.
right, and I would encourage you looking into things like that. Then the last thing is, as I think about this project, my biggest concern is the Snow Road intersection. I drove that for many years, and it's difficult. And I quite frankly, I don't feel right adding any more units than what's allowed by the bylaw to that intersection. Okay? So, it's R20, whatever the build out is, that's what, at some point in time, town meeting decided is the right amount of units for this area of town and the right amount of units to add to that intersection. I don't feel right adding any more than that, right? So that's just a handful of units, and that's a problem. But if you can actually add the 3rd lane to improve the service level, then that's okay. Now, the question I have is, do you know that you can do that? Do you need any land taking to pull that off?
I know that we have the full survey of it. It is a little tight, for sure. So, we may need some, maybe some room for some off-grading, because you're heading up into that hill where the Maxwell Drive apartments are. So, and again, we need to do the full design. We think that we can keep everything in terms of pavement, curbing, etc., and potentially a small retaining wall within the right of way. There may be some off grading that needs to be done. That would be, say, a temporary grading easement for construction. So we feel pretty comfortable that we don't need any takings, but we may need some areas for off grading going into that hill.
That's not what the memo says, though. The AK memo acknowledged that there would be an eminent domain taking for extending that third lane.
I think it depends. There could be potential. I don't. If he said that, if there is an eminent domain,
We don't have a plan, right? You haven't designed.
no. So that's to be seen. But from what we've looked at, that may not be required. But so I know that in the I think there was the analysis that was done by the traffic engineer that, and correct me if I'm wrong, right now that intersection is, I believe, at an E. In the future, it would turn to an F, but with the improvements, even with the development of this site, with our project, with the improvements for the right turn lane, I believe it could go to, in the future, a level of C.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I'd read it somewhere. So,
Yeah.
I acknowledge
So-
that. If
so-
you can get the turn lane, that improves it. Now, I'm gonna wanna talk to our engineer a little bit, because I don't know if that's just looking at flat geometries when they come up with these numbers. I suspect they are. But the reality is, in 3D, the intersection is on an angle, which is part of the problem. Plus, it's on an elevation. So I really kind of want to understand, if there's an engineering algorithm on a flat surface that says this amount of traffic, it changes from F or E to C. Is that always the case, or once you apply the 3D to it, does it change? Because really, that's part of the problem, is the angle that intersection hits 140.
Right, and we'd be
Right.
looking to square that up as well,
I don't know how you're gonna square it up.
or to some, or at least with the rounding. So if someone's going, we want to.
So okay,
we're gonna try to make it
I
as
think
safe
we
as
can agree that we're probably one of the next things that needs to happen is that's gonna need to get designed. Because in my mind, if it can't be done, then there's probably no point in talking about such density, at least speaking from this member of the board,
Understood.
right? So I probably need to get that designed and see if it can be done.
And we had, just so you know where we are in that process, we had our land surveyor do a very detailed existing condition survey of along Snow Road all the way down to that intersection, and even going over to the lights at the Stop and Shop Plaza. So we have a very detailed existing condition survey of that whole area. So if there's an issue with, I know there's going to be an issue with a utility pole. There's a big utility pole that has has quite a number of
seen it,
lines on
yes.
it. So there's those things that we're going to have to address as well. So that's the next on the list.
And I'll be honest with you, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but this member of the board is probably gonna want that intersection built before there's a CO. Just throwing it out there,
Yeah.
because what I don't wanna end up with is a situation where this thing starts getting built and somebody comes back and says, oh, we can't do it.
Right.
So, and I'm not gonna be okay with, $1 million bond or something like that. In my mind, if we're gonna add traffic to that intersection, we need to know that we're not making it worse, we're making it better.
Understood. And we agree with you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I think that's actually the point I want to follow up on as well, because I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. I assume your expert probably didn't want to spend more of your money than they had to. So your expert talks about not doing the turning lane until after the project's completed. The email we got made it sound like it would be done. It was acknowledged that it almost needed to be done, and that it sounded like it would be done more up front. So am I getting that right? The consultant more or less just didn't want to commit you to anything, but you understand it's a critical part of it.
Yes, and our consultant, he's had other projects where it was, okay, we have the design for it. If it turns out you need it, we'll, escrow the money. And if not, you can use it for someplace else where your things. But in this case, we're committing and dedicated to making improvements to that. And to your point, yeah, he didn't want to, promise overcommit and promise the world. So, but to your point, we are dedicated to making sure that is really kind of to your point, Bill, that's kind of the linchpin with a lot of this.
I believe it is.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, who's that speaking?
Sounds like Peter.
Peter Adams.
I thought it was God.
I know, it's quite amazing. I can see you. I've been watching you since the start, but we can't figure out how to get the video working. I'm glad that the voice is working anyways.
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
How is all this going to help somebody taking a left-hand turn to go south into something as simple as Stop and Shop?
Want me to address that?
Sure.
So by adding the right turn lane, that reduces the potential queue of cars that would be going and taking a left-hand turn. So where there's just one lane right now, whether someone's taking a left or a right, you have one queue of cars. Where you can have a dedicated right turn lane, it takes that block of traffic that would be heading, I guess, to the west. I always think it's north.
North. North.
Yeah, on my north arrow, it's.
Yeah, maybe it is.
I know.
Maybe that
I'm just going to say north. So the block
Would
of
be going south.
the block of traffic that would be going north, they have the dedicated right turn lane, so that reduces the queuing of any cars that would be taking a left to go to Stop and Shop.
So, Peter, I think his point is it doesn't necessarily help make that left turn easier. It just reduces the wait for people that may be turning left. Now, that being said, and again, I'm going to be looking to our peer review for input. I am concerned that actually that line of traffic turning right may become more of a hindrance than a help, because it may make it harder to see what's coming down, especially again because of the angle of that Snow Road comes into 140 at that point in time. So, I can see where, again, if we're talking about a T intersection on a flat surface, that right turn lane would absolutely help. I question whether it really does, considering the angle, considering the slope, and that's something that we need to see, whether it really does help or not. It might help with the wait time, just because there's fewer cars waiting. I'm not so sure it's going to help with safety. So I think, we really need to see a design. Mm-hmm. We need to see a design and then really look into it.
Another comment, if I could.
Yep.
If the duplexes are going to be the front doors are going to be facing Snow Road, what's going to stop anybody from parking on Snow Road all the time to go in their front door?
There's no place to park on Snow Road? Yeah.
A lot of pavement.
The
I can park a car there.
Well, I mean, anybody can park anywhere, but
Very unlikely.
It's very unlikely. The access, the parking, whether it's for the garage parking or your parking space, it's all interior to the site. I don't anticipate that there would be much of a cause for anybody to just stop their car on Snow Road and walk into the house.
So there'll be sidewalks that lead from the front around to the interior of the project?
Yes.
Another point I wanted to ask about when you were talking about that trash dumpster, as I recollect, the trash truck would have to go past approximately, it's either 10 to 15 parking spaces, which means he drives in, empties the dumpster, backs out. I think the length of 15 parking spaces must be 100 feet or more. To me, that's a lot to back up with a camera that's usually dirty on a rubbish packer that you can't see out of probably weekly, or I don't know how many times a week.
It's 11 to be exact.
11 spaces plus an island.
And where's
Okay.
snow going? Snow disposal in the winter.
Yep.
Is that on there somewhere?
We had it on the original plans. Again, we have multiple areas of green space at the corners of the quad areas. We have substantial areas where we could have potential overflow snow storage areas on the corners of that quad.
They're just on a lot where you wouldn't risk very quickly losing parking spots.
Say that again?
There aren't a lot of spots. I mean, so you've got all the islands, but you know,
Right.
unless you're gonna,
Yeah. I mean, if you had you have the Blizzard of '88 or Blizzard, I wasn't '88. It was 78. I'm jeez. I was there. I mean, you'd be trucking. That's crazy. You'd be, taking front end loaders and stockpiling snow in places. For your general everyday storms, they could plow some of them out towards the edges of the islands and whatnot. But we do have large green areas where we could do if there was substantial stockpiling. And then if it got to that point, they might be trucking it off the site.
You get a year like 14 or 15, you'll be hauling it out of there.
All right, anything else, Peter, while we're got you
No,
there?
that's it.
All right,
Sorry.
no worries.
Mr. Chair, just one other plan question. I know the original revision had the turn analysis, and the fire department had come back with some concerns about the size of the truck that was used in the turn analysis. Any follow up with them or to confirm whether or not they have any concerns with any of the revisions?
The truck, it wasn't the exact. I think it was a little bit bigger, but no, we'll have to get the exact wheelbase, etc., for that specific vehicle.
There was a new truck coming in, a new ladder truck coming in.
Yeah.
Is it?
That you need to get the turning template for the new ladder truck.
Okay.
I'm just gonna offer one other comment. I get that the townhouses are there to break it up. I wouldn't mind if you can give me an address or somehow identify this place in Natick that supposedly looks something similar. I wouldn't mind being able to take a drive by there and looking.
Sure.
But, you've got, looks like roughly 75 feet or so of space. You can make a really nice evergreen forest there to block the view, right? If we just got rid of those entirely, planted a bunch of evergreen trees, some sort of, trees that are, will block. It just seems to me that would be a lot more pleasant, if you will, from the Snow Road view than some houses. But I will, defer and let's see what it looks like with some sort of a 3D view. But it's a nice chunk of land, and just it seems like you could make a nice
Right.
a rather thick forest of trees there and just hide it.
Yeah.
And then you could put parking on that side of the
I
entrance.
don't even know if I'd put parking there because there's not a lot of houses, not a lot of living space, not a lot of units on that side there. So, maybe leave the whatever it is, the 25 spaces or so that are there now. Leave them obviously, but I don't even know if you need any on the other side. But
I agree with that.
Yeah, and then, yeah, on the other side, yeah, you give the 25, and that's like clubhouse parking.
clubhouse and people who are on the
Yeah.
ends of each of those
Correct.
buildings may park there. And,
Yeah.
Right. Mr. Hill, do you have any comments?
Sure. I always do. Just going back to the site design questions, and I just want to follow up on what Alex was saying about the trash management. And I do want to just remind everybody for the record that we actually raised all these issues back on December 12th.
Yep.
We actually asked for a lot of information, and including details on these turning lanes, and it's been 4 months and we still don't have that kind of detail. And I always hate it when developers complain about delays and complain about boards dragging things out, but we've actually raised a lot of these issues back in December, and we haven't received. We raised a lot of issues on traffic, which I'll get to, and we didn't really get much in terms of responses. But just going back to the site design issue, I'm looking at the plan from February 14th, and that's your current concept plan, right?
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay. So you said the southeast corner is where you put the trash, but I don't see any trash area. I see a maintenance garage.
It's right to the right of it.
Just to the right of that, at the end of the
very
that
end,
driving
dead
aisle.
end.
Those two little blocks. What is that, dumpster?
Compactor,
So that's serving the entire project?
yes.
There's no way.
Yeah, absolutely.
236 units, one compactor.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the calculations. We can send them to you.
I cannot believe it. I do a lot of these projects around the state, and I look at 40-unit apartment buildings with compactors in them. I mean, you've got 236 units. I can't. How is all the trash from these buildings going to get?
What's this one here? Brightness. Oh, when you see her face.
Peter, I think you need to go on mute.
Sorry.
People would bring their trash down and or they again have a concierge trash service too as well. Could
So-
be another
So
option.
236 residents are going to bring their trash bags to this corner of the site and put them into a compactor. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And what's in the maintenance garage?
For the
Property maintenance.
property management, for whether it's landscape
Refrigerators.
items, yeah,
So
anything that needs to be.
lawnmowers, leaf blowers.
No.
Or-
It would be more like parts and pieces, attic stock, things of that nature for
So
property attic stock,
What's that?
like plumbing fixtures, maybe shower doors, things of that nature for property maintenance.
So where would the lawnmowers and leaf blowers?
There would be none of be contract landscaping.
So none of that stuff would be kept on site?
No.
I just think that putting the trash in that corner of the site, it seems to be very unwise. Number one, we talked about the circulation issue. I mean, you'd have to have a dump truck come in, I would think, almost daily to empty that out, given the number of units. And there's really no turnaround area. And you've also put it as close as you possibly can to the well. I mean, is that?
Again, it's a balancing act. I mean, these are self-contained units, obviously, but
But a compactor is going to use hydraulic oil of some sort, right? Isn't it going to have?
I'm sure. But again, we're balancing it with: do we want to have a dumpster located next to the abutting residences? We're trying to put it in a place that's least impactful to the abutting properties. Again, this backs up to where the back parking lot and dumpsters are for Stop and Shop. It abuts those areas as well. So again, and I'm not saying any of your points don't have merit, and we'll look deeper into it. Obviously, we want to have a property that functions properly, that works for circulation and for the residents. Absolutely, and if that's not done, then it's going to be a problem, and then it's going to have to get rectified at additional cost. So, so I'm not saying that there isn't merit to it, but also keep in mind, we want to balance that with not impacting abutting properties and having trash trucks going, emptying dumpsters, boom, 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 at 7 o'clock in the morning, multiple times around the site, and disturbing not only the residents but the abutting people. So
I got all that,
again,
but-
there's a balancing act.
Well, no, I got that, but I think you also have a lot of other options. For example, in the center of the site, you could put the dumpster areas between buildings
1 and 2,
4 and 5,
or 1 and 2 even.
or 1 and 2 is closer to the well. I mean,
Yeah.
to really, the best location is between 4 and 5, and then also your garbage truck could come up without having to take turns. It could just pull up. And another point, again, going to what Alex said, there's no loading areas anywhere. So it just, again, I look at a lot of these projects around the state, and you almost always have loading areas, temporary parking areas for all these vehicles that come on a daily basis. The trash truck is a great example. You could easily remove some of these parking spaces to create loading zones in front of the buildings. I mean, that's reducing parking, and then we have an issue with that, but the solution is to reduce the number of units, and then you wouldn't need so many parking spaces. Or add units back somewhere else. It just seems to me like there's the loading area, the temporary parking areas, there's going to be congestion in this project if you don't address that, and the trash is one of those issues. It's one of the users of these loading areas.
Okay.
And then I think the snow storage is a real concern. I think, yeah, you have a lot of room in the center of the site. So if that's where the snow storage is going to be, that's fine. But I would be very concerned about putting snow storage on the north side, because doesn't that slope down towards the abutters?
Everything slopes. Ultimately to the east. Yeah.
Yeah, north and east.
Yeah.
So, the snow that you're plowing off of a road is not clean snow. So you don't want that going onto abutting properties, but also you don't want that going anywhere near the wetland, because that wetland is tributary to the wellhead area. There's a brook in that wetland that goes south into the wellhead. So all that snow storage really needs to be away from all those issues, the northern property line and the eastern property line. So I think that's something to be really concerned about. And with respect to the traffic issues we just talked about briefly, and I think we want to hear from the traffic engineer before we get into a lot of these details, but I think we definitely need to see the plans that you would propose for squaring off that intersection, as well as to put that right turn lane in. And there was also some discussion about a left turn lane on Route 140, I think.
That was suggested as having a dedicated left turn from 122 left onto Snow Road.
Okay. And I'll save the rest of my traffic comments until after we hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan is, and all of us have kind of come up with some site issues, and in my mind, what I've heard you say is that, this is a concept, and are we on the right track? But I will say that if you come back with the more detail, I hope a lot of these issues are addressed.
Yes.
And I'll just go ahead and chime in. I mean, I think the reality is that on the way to work, people are going to drop their trash. Okay, people from building 3 and 4, they're not going to walk it over there. They're going to put it in their car. They're going to drive over there on the way to work. And I think I mentioned this last time. I saw this at the Shrewsbury Dunkin' Donuts, which has a place, apartment complex right behind it. You can see when I'm sitting at the drive-through, I can see people driving up on their way out of the complex, and they stop at the trash thing, get out of the car, drop their trash, and they go. That's going to be real problematic with something like this. What you've got there, where now you're gonna have cars backing in and out, and so I think I agree. I think the trash thing is just really in not a good location.
But I think to Dan's point also, we had this discussion and in detail, at least once.
We did. When a detailed plan comes back, hopefully these things are addressed.
Yes.
That's, you know,
What I'm gathering for this, number one, the intersection. Let's get that designed and looked at. Number one. Number two, I'm gonna fully tune up this whole layout. We'll also be looking to do a presentation so you can see what it's going to look like as well, so that you get a visual.
right, but I want to be really clear. This member of the board said, I'm not focused on the number of units. I'm focused on the impact.
Correct.
Okay, so, and I think that what you took away from that is if you can build that intersection and make things better, that then 236 or whatever this is good to go. I may be there. I don't know what the rest of the board is. So I don't know that this concept is something the rest of the board is happy with. So you may want to try to explore that to some extent. So don't take what I'm saying as the way the board feels, because this is a
Gotcha.
concept. I don't know that this is a concept that will fly with our board.
Got you.
Dan, you were,
Just that perspective that Bill mentioned, just to be clear what we're talking about, I think it's a SketchUp model, and do you guys use SketchUp in your other projects?
I know they use Revit for and for some of the perspectives. So
Yeah, I think a 3D perspective, I'm familiar with SketchUp, but yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
other, obviously, software programs
Yeah.
that do this, but that's what we're looking for, is from different perspectives, probably from 140 at least, overlooking Stop and Shop, but do you also want to see that from Snow Road, or?
I think we have to see it for someone.
Yeah.
That's probably.
So I think your architect can, spit that up pretty quickly.
yes,
But this was a video, and maybe the thing to do is go to the town plan, the planning department website, and look for the project. And I
Mr. Chairman?
1727 Upton Street. 1727 Upton Street. I assume those videos are up on that. They're there. Yeah. And look at the videos that were presented for that. And I think they did a great job in, conveying what that project would look like.
okay.
Sorry, there's so many things on Upton Street. No, I just get confused with the numbers.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'd like to speak at some point tonight. It doesn't have to be now. It's site plan related, so I don't know if
So
you can.
I think, Dan, you were basically done?
I'm done.
Yeah, Jeff, why don't you go?
Okay, because
And you
So-
probably should identify yourself for the record.
thank you. Jeff Walsh, I'm with Graves Engineering, the peer reviewer for the zoning board of appeals. We did issue our first review letter on a full set of fully engineered plans. Those plans were dated August of 2024. Our letter came out at the end of October. And then in November, the first concept plan came out. And when I first heard of it, I said, oh, I got to do a follow-up review. And then it's one page. Okay, well, wait a minute now. We're talking concept. It's a two-dimensional layout upon which discussion like tonight would occur. And I spent very little time with that back then, and I never presented to the board. And then the February 14th plan came out a few weeks ago, or when have you. Anyways, I reviewed that today, and honestly, I'm glad that the applicant's team took the approach to work with concept plans now. To me, I liken this to a subdivision that's gonna come before a planning board that first comes through with a preliminary plan. If you got a simple piece of property with, in the case of a subdivision with no access issues, no water supply issues, no land area issues for septic systems and private wells and so forth, preliminary plan doesn't have a lot of value, or not, it has some value. If you have a difficult site with whether it's topography or traffic or access to the site or whatever, it's great. It's great. And in my opinion, this concept plan that's being worked through with the ZBA now is the perfect tool to get these discussions and let the board see on paper what's being looked at. And furthermore, what the concerns are, and I heard those loud and clear tonight, And then I'd like to think the applicant's team can go back and, you know, for not fully engineered and all the level and effort and money that it takes to do that, you get what could even be a drastically different layout just for discussion purposes, So to that point, I don't feel the board ever's been, worried about asking for a lot just to see what it is. And I think it's got a lot of value here where a lot of engineering time and dollars don't go into it. So with that, I'd like to share my thoughts of what I look at with this type of conceptual plan and detailed plans in general for 40Bs as well as a conceptual plan, and then rate and then share some concerns I have with the conceptual plan. First of all, density. Density is number of units per acre, number of acres per, or what have you, and zoning bylaw has a requirement for a certain number of square feet per dwelling unit for a dwelling in a residential multifamily zoning district. This project is not in a residential multifamily zoning district, but this project is exactly what goes into residential multifamily zoning districts here in Grafton. Those projects are usually along Creeper Hill Road, Providence Road, and possibly another road that's a major road in town, so there aren't local access issues. Nevertheless, when I look at the plans, I don't deal with traffic. You've got a separate peer reviewer for that. I'm not an expert in traffic. But I look at the allocation of space for whatever goes into a site. And I don't come up with a magic number to begin with, number of dwelling units per acre, what have you. So I look at serving the site, is there availability of water supply, wastewater disposal, electrical system capacity? In general terms, I know electrical systems suppliers will deal with that, but one needs to know that all these utilities are available. Area roadway capacity being dealt with by others, and roadway or intersection issues. We've talked enough about those. Now, allocation of space comes to building setbacks from the project perimeter. In other words, impact to abutters, a potential impact to abutters. Spacing separation of the buildings and layout in general within the site. That's exactly what this concept plan talks to, and it really allows us all to have this kind of productive discussion. Building heights and number of stories, that ties into dwelling unit density. The taller you make them, the higher the density goes up, simple as that. But that too has impacts, whether it's for emergency access to it or whether it's impacts to the neighborhood. Size of the dwelling unit, square foot per dwelling unit is what I mean by that. Allocation of land for parking, allocation of land for amenities, the park that's been talked about, or the playground area, whatever you want to call it, the clubhouse, the pool, just land, dog parks if they have one in the facility, which hasn't been brought up, and I'm not advocating for it against it, but these are all the types of things that we talk about for allocation of space. And then lastly, allocation of space for stormwater management. Excuse me. With that, the first set of plans, the advantage of this concept plan, we already went through one round of revision with the detailed plans. And there were issues to be addressed, but I didn't see anything that, with respect to stormwater management, that made the project, as I knew it then, probably, the stormwater management probably could deal with that layout and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, there were revisions that had to be made, but if we're talking concept plans and talking these other things, allocation of space, it doesn't make sense to get into the stormwater management, yes, because in my opinion, we had one round of it. Now I'd like to go on to what specifically I had concerns about or issues I'd like to bring to the board's attention. First is, I already talked about the multifamily zoning district that my experience with the other 40Bs in town that look something like this is we rely on the rural residential multifamily requirements to understand, the density, because that's what was brought in, put in the town regulations years ago. As far as building setbacks, the townhouses along Snow Road, they have a front yard. One building is about 18 feet, dimensioned about 18 feet from the right of way, not the roadway, the right of way. Another one's dimensioned at 23. So they vary between 18 and a little over 30, I think. Yeah, I got one at 31 feet. They're not in a straight line, so that adds some character to it. But they sit closer to Snow Road than the other buildings in the immediate area. And that's one issue that I think that it seems prudent to bring the townhouses fronts so that they set back more or less similar to what the other houses in the area set back at, which I'm seeing anywhere from 25 feet south of Maxwell Drive to mid-30s on the opposite side of the street to closer to about 50 feet on the same side of the street as the project. Next, with respect to allocation of space, there was talk of a park of some sort. That to me is important for allocation of space, and the thing is, it's proposed, I estimate about 30 feet by 30 feet, or about 900 square feet. I want to share with you that I said, all right, well, I don't know what's trying to be achieved with the playground, whether it's just a place for benches, people to congregate, or a play area. But if a play area is being contemplated, Norcross Park on North Street, that's got a playground area that's roughly 146 feet long by 41 to 56 feet wide, as I scaled off of an aerial, and so it runs about 7,000 square feet compared to the 900. Again, it's important to talk about allocation of space now because this all comes down to the magic issue of dwelling units per acre. And then lastly, stormwater management. I'd be interested in hearing in general terms, doesn't even have to be tonight, what the applicant's team's intent might be with respect to stormwater management, whether they'll be going with an open basin concentrated one area of the site as originally proposed. Well, this is in water supply protection overlay. I'd recommend spreading out the stormwater recharge into groundwater throughout the site to try to mimic existing conditions, as was done for the Pleasant Street project. And then lastly, the trash compactor. Thank you, Dan, for bringing it up, that it's just outside the Zone 1. I'm worried about not only the potential for hydraulic and other hydraulic fluid leaks, but with the compacting of trash, there's the liquids that come out of the trash that need to be collected somewhere and go into the sanitary system and not onto the ground and away with the stormwater. Certainly not outside the Zone 1. So I've seen a number of these facilities with trash and recycling centers, and they are nice, but they are set up for the cars will come, is what I've seen. They're not there long, but the residents show up long enough to drop off their trash and recyclables and so forth. And that, Mr. Chairman, is all I wanted to talk about. But again, I really feel that this conceptual plan exercise is if, at least for me as an engineer, is meaningful, and it allows us to talk without getting into the details of what's going to come later on.
So just kind of as a reminder, you brought up Pleasant Street, and if I recall correctly, the stormwater management on Pleasant Street, we actually increased, like there's the required state minimum, if you will.
Yes.
And I believe we actually required a higher level, certainly in some respects, right? As far as captured solids and things like that, I thought we required
They met the state minimum with respect to treatment,
yeah.
whereas that project was also in the water supply protection overlay district. The concern was the recharge of volume, not peak rate, but volume. In other words, don't allow more surface water to run off. Let's get it back into the ground, similar to what's occurring now. There certainly was adequate treatment, but it spoke to volume and trying not to lose the volume that's going back into the.
I thought we upped the treatment.
There is significant treatment that went beyond the 80%
Yeah.
total suspended solids required by the state.
Okay, and I think that we talked about that in this project as well, and I think the expectation should be that when we get back to detailed stormwater management, things like that, that things like treatment are not just at the state minimum, but at an increased level, particularly because of the wellhead.
That's right, and not only at the state minimum, but on the Grafton stormwater regulations, a
Yep.
local requirement, there is a higher level of required treatment than the state.
Yep.
That is a benchmark that I review against.
We also talked about the fact that the, I think their infiltration or their detention or infiltration basin was in that northeast corner, which was obviously close to the wetland that's tributary to the wellhead area. You know, my understanding of stormwater treatment and management is that's not a perfect science. A lot of stuff gets through. So the more we can move the infiltration, the recharge away from the area, the zone one area, the better.
Okay.
And actually, I'd like to add one more thing, Mr. Chairman. If there was any other thoughts that the board or anybody might want to have about what would the layout look like if, well, one of the ifs could be, there was talk a while ago of two entrances and there was talk tonight of possibly eliminating the townhouse. Those are two ifs that could go on paper pretty easy, in my opinion, without all the detailed engineering. But it'll give you and the board and the applicant's team a chance to look at it, and once it's on paper, sometimes it looks a little different than what was envisioned in the mind.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Other comments from the board?
Bill,
Oh, go ahead, Peter.
on getting back to traffic, all we've talked about leaving the site is going left towards Worcester Street. We haven't really talked about going north towards East Street. In my mind, anybody in the morning leaving that site that is gonna go to Boston on the train, after they do it a few times and go through 3 traffic lights, Worcester Street to North Main Street and all that, they might try going north under the pike, of course, to East Street to Institute, and then that way, which is shorter anyways. When you go over the tracks going that way, the road is 19 feet wide to blacktop. I guess I would ask Jeff if a 19-foot road is a concern.
If I could, I'd like to defer to your traffic consultant on that.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And we're probably at that point where we should have him come join us.
I'm glad he's here. I haven't seen him, so that
No, he's here. Go ahead, introduce yourself and
Sure. I'm John Dixon with TEC. We did the peer review for the traffic assessment and the access within the site. To start off with the north direction coming out of there, it's northeast, so to speak. But essentially turning right out of the site. It is a local road. Mass DOT, the Project Development Design Guide, has a minimum of 9-foot lane widths for a local road, which would be 18 feet. It is narrow. It is not outside of what's allowable. The area with the railroad tracks itself is right at a sharp corner. My assumption would be that corner was put in to a long time ago in order to create a more perpendicular crossing to the railroad tracks. And those narrower road there, if anything, is actually slowing traffic down with that corner. Widening that there, it's not necessarily going to make it safer. I did look at the crashes throughout that stretch. There's been one accident there in the last 7 years. It was a single vehicle accident with a guardrail. So it's not showing signs of any significant crash trends in that area that raised any flags for me personally when reviewing the traffic impact.
What else you got as far as your review? What are the open issues that we still need to?
Sure, yeah, we can go right through this. First item really was about the volumes that were proposed. After going through that further, looking at the different areas where the development's been cut back, where things were overestimated, things were underestimated. We do agree that the trip generation that's been estimated should be conservative for what's actually now being proposed, so that it should be less than what was in the traffic impact assessment because of the changes that have been made. So we are, we will accept the numbers that are put forward. No numbers have been put forward to show lesser based on lower amounts, but we can safely accept that the numbers that were put forward originally are acceptable because the units have been reduced and because of the factors that were involved, some being high, some being low, that were covered in our first review of the assessment. So that's where that sort of goes with our first follow-up comment there. The second one involves the intersection of Snow Road with 122.
Sorry, which number?
Sorry. So yes, we didn't include the numbers that we didn't have an issue with. So number 7 in here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, do we want to try to field questions live as we're going through, or save?
Probably not a bad idea, yeah.
So just a couple quick things on 6. And so we talk about the AASHTO guidelines that the applicant's consultants took issue with to some degree. You talk about them not meeting those guidelines at 35 miles an hour, but I didn't see what the threshold might be for 30 miles an hour. And I understand the thought process on kind of, you want to leave some buffer, but that section of Snow Road, you're either going uphill or you're coming downhill knowing you're about to hit an intersection. I don't know that it's ripe for rapid speeding. I'm sure residents can let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think 30 is completely unreasonable, especially if that meets the guidelines for sightlines.
Yeah, so it did meet for 30 miles an hour for the safe stopping distance. And there's really two things to look at. There's the safe stopping distance and the preferred stopping distance. So it meets for the safe stopping distance for 30 and 35. It doesn't meet for ideal stopping distances for 35. And what that has to do with more with the ideal ones is when you're approaching it, your goal is to be able to see far enough to be able to maneuver without anyone on the road having to slow down for you. Or was 85%, or reduce their speed by more than 85, or less than, they need to you want them to maintain their speed of what they're going at, or 85% of that. Anything less than that, you're considered essentially cutting someone off. So it has a safe sight distance where if you're pulling out in front of someone, they can stop safely. With 35 miles an hour, you might potentially cut someone off, and cause them to reduce their speed, with this to maybe 60% of what they were going. And realistically, what that ends up doing is it makes it harder for someone to pull out, but it doesn't have an impact on the residents of that road necessarily. It just makes it a little more challenging for someone at that site to get out of that site. And that's assuming a 35 mile per hour speed.
And I didn't see either response touch on what is impeding the sight line heading in that direction. Is it something that's movable? Is it or is it a moot conversation because it's a house and it's not moving anyway?
I believe the sight line to the right was
The curvature of the road, isn't it?
it's the horizontal geometry of the road.
So you'd have to redesign the road to really address it.
Yeah.
But that was only
Or
for,
it could,
that's only for a desirable intersection site
right,
distance?
it does meet for safe stopping sight distance.
Sorry, that was it.
If I
But
could,
shifting the driveway could, adjust that as well as an option if it's, being revised.
if I could just add a point, and I'm surprised actually that we haven't just had the developer do ATRs to collect the speed data. I mean, that seems to be standard practice. In fact, if in the states, in Mass DOT's highway design guide, it basically requires that you comply with AASHTO. And AASHTO would require that the 85th percentile speed be used for these studies, and we don't have that data without doing ATRs, automatic traffic recorders, is that what it's called?
Yep.
They're basically the speed tubes that collect the data that speeds up the one down the road. So is that
That would
something we
be,
should-
that would be an appropriate way to confirm what the actual speeds are. Otherwise, you're working with assumptions that vehicles are traveling at 30 or 35 miles an hour.
Right.
You know, personally, I think 35 miles is realistic for the characteristics of the roadway, from what I saw on it. But it is beneficial to have those studies to know exactly what it is. I can definitely.
Yeah, I think we actually asked for this on
That's my
December
recollection,
12th.
too.
That's my note. And in my experience, I've actually ordered these before. They're like $400
Yeah.
to have a company go out there, put the tubes down, collect the data, and get a report.
So we don't have any update on if any tubes were put in place. That wasn't included in the response to our comments on that.
I think it's safe to assume it wasn't.
So that was on 6. 7, the crash data, we you know, as I mentioned last time, we didn't agree with the crash data that was presented. We've showed in our response the crashes that we see just from the crash portal. And what we noticed going through it was that there is a crash trend. Well, it's not above the crash rate for a typical intersection in the state. There is a crash trend that between left turning vehicles on Snow Road and 122, or left turning vehicles on 122 onto Snow Road, where left turns were involved in 40% of the collisions that occurred in that, I believe it was a 5-year period. So that is part of the reason why we were recommending that the right turn lane and other modifications to the intersection be designed, permitted, and constructed for approval, and not something that be conducted down the road pending traffic volumes, because there is a crash trend there from what we've seen on here.
Can I just jump in and add too? And also, I think it's important to keep in mind is it raises to 112% during those morning peak hours. Is that correct?
So I believe it was, yeah, it's a significant increase in the number of left turns anticipated. Yeah, so it would be 112% more left turns during the morning peak hour.
And based on your study, how many more crashes could we expect with that increase?
In my,
Is there any way you can calculate a number?
that's not something you can really calculate. The challenging
Based
part
on
is
trend?
not necessarily linear. As delays get longer, people tend to be more impatient with the gaps that they'll take. So it can actually increase more than it would linearly based on that. So 100% increase doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% more crashes. It could be significantly more if the delays are increasing and people are getting frustrated and are willing to take shorter gaps to make those maneuvers. So.
Well, I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think we could kind of predict. I mean, I think you had stated there was 15 collisions over, call it like a 4-year span. I think you used a 4-year span between 2018 and 2022. And so 40% of that is 6, you know, if we're increasing that to 112%, I mean,
Theoretically,
is that
could-
right?
I think it would be more than that. I think it would be more than.
The 112 is increase in left turns, not increase, it's not the 40% that's increasing.
So
When the project gets built, there'll be a 112% increase in left turns.
Okay.
Now,
That,
and I think what he's saying is
how does it affect the crash
we
rate?
can't extrapolate
Yeah.
that, I think is what he's saying.
right,
It's not linear.
Well,
it would be
more than linear.
It could be.
Well,
yeah.
that's what he's
I
suggesting.
would
I
expect
think
it
he's
could be
right.
more than linear.
It'd
Right.
be more
Could
than
be
linear, right.
some sort of
Because-
I won't say exponential, but something a little more curving upward as you get those shorter,
Right.
as people are taking more risky maneuvers because they've been waiting for a longer period of time.
I have 2 comments on this. We actually asked, again, back on December 12th, we actually asked the applicant to inquire with the Grafton Police Department for the crash data that the police department has. Has that been?
The response from the applicant was that there's been only one crash there, and it was referencing the previous, the previous study. So I don't believe there was any update to the crashes there.
So I don't think the applicant got the data from the police department. And then related to the point about the intersection and the crash data, I think one of the, in the gaps, I think one of the questions we had was, shouldn't the intersection of the Stop and Shop with 140 be part of the study?
Yep.
Remember that conversation? Is that something?
Stop and Shop with 140 was included in the study.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was included in the original study. We didn't have any issues with the analysis that was done at that intersection, other than a couple of items that covered both of them, such as trying to understand what HCM methodology was used and things along those lines that incorporate both of the locations.
So, in the developer's traffic engineer's letter, he said that the level of service study does not account for the traffic signal 450 feet east on Worcester Street, the Country Plaza driveway.
Right. I
Which
believe
would
he
allow
was
for
saying
gaps.
that essentially what he was saying is that because there's a signal there, it allows for gaps, and that gives more opportunities. My opinion on that is that it will create more gaps for people turning right. For people turning left, you still tend to have a fairly consistent stream headed down towards south towards the signal. So while it could help right turning vehicles, particularly if you only have one lane, and you're not really helping that much with that.
And Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Hill's point is, I think, emblematic of the theme that we've touched on, that there are a lot of areas where it feels like we're doing the minimum. And there are things that we could do that maybe they're consciously being left out because we think that makes the analysis more conservative. It would only help your case. Well, we need you to prove it to us. And I think there's, it seems like our consultant is relatively familiar or okay with some of the netting going on, but there are a lot of places where either his comments or yours referred to, this is going this way and this is going this way, or we changed this since the original plan. I'm almost leaning towards, do we need to do the whole thing from scratch so that we have actual data based on the action, and maybe it comes with a site review or site revision, but so that we're not just making these assumptions that everything's kind of netting out to a more conservative position. Because I'm not an expert, but otherwise we're just taking your word for it.
So, the way the synchro analysis was done with the intersections, that is a standard way for a transportation impact study. There are options to analyze them more in sync with each other, where it's modeled out in other ways, and that's something that can certainly be requested. It's not typical for a traffic impact study at a basic level, but it's something that can be used for more complicated situations.
Would you consider this a more complicated situation?
I don't see that necessarily as, I don't see it as necessary for this in particular. I don't think it would give much of a different result. I think if to take out all of the, well, this does this, well, this is, I would take those out and take it at its base of saying, this is what numbers came out. We can say, yes, those numbers meet what is expected because other things have changed. We can say those are a base, but we're not going to assume they're going to be lower than that.
Right.
And we can say that that these intersections will operate at these levels of services because other things have been reduced, but we're not going to, well, it's probably lower than that. I'm not going to agree that it's probably lower, it's probably better because of the signal, but we can take it at what it is safely.
Yeah, and I think you probably more eloquently said kind of what I was getting at, in that if you offer an explanation that says, we left this out, but we think it helps us, just know that this member is disregarding that. I'm not going to assume that something is better based on something you left out. If you want credit for it, you need to show it to me.
So, yeah, and there are ways to model that to demonstrate that if that was necessary. But I think we can take it at what it is, and so we do include in this our recommendation for some physical improvements. The most important recommendation is the added right turn lane on Snow Road. A lot of the other things are listed more as suggestions, but though that is primarily because most of the other items in there are in Mass DOT jurisdiction, and that would be up to MassDOT ultimately to decide. So some of the things we
Can I-
included in there.
Interrupt you for one second.
Yeah.
Did we kind of jump to the end?
Oh no, this is in part of, I think it's reiterated at the end. This is as part of comment 7.
Okay,
As
thank you.
the second paragraph of our follow-up comment.
Oh, got it, thank you.
So, we recommend the board consider a condition of approval that requires the applicant to design, permit, and construct the improvements that include a minimum 75-foot long right turn lane on Snow Road. And then we recommend the construction of a formal left turn lane on Route 122 southbound. We also recommend do not block box markings, which is like that painted X. And that's essentially telling if queues ever do get back to that point from the signal, that don't block this so that people can still get in and out of Snow Road. I'm sure those are becoming a lot more common. You could also take a look at where the lane merges into one lane. If that merge happens prior to the intersection, it's one less lane to cross of traffic, but it could increase the volume in that lane. So that's something Mass DOT would really need to weigh in on. And so those options would come from Mass DOT. The other thing to note on this is that the volumes, the levels of service, as we mentioned earlier, those are based on the traffic volumes. They're not based on the geometrics of it. So a critical point to having those levels of service be accurate is proper sight distance. So one of the things as a proper set of engineered plans would need to include is proper sight lines. So if retaining walls are being considered, is there sufficient sight over those retaining walls to see what's coming? There's shrubs in front of CVS. Do those need to be removed? So that would need to be part of that engineering plan.
We're talking about Snow Road and 140?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as a full set of engineered plans, that those sight lines need to be clear and open in order for those levels of service to be accurate. Otherwise, you're not seeing as far, it's taking longer to go out, your level of service is going down, and again, people are more frustrated trying to get those gaps.
So, what you're telling me is, according to the engineering, or according to the science, there's no difference between a flat 90-degree T and an incline at an angle that's not 90 degrees.
Not that factors into level of service. The
Interesting.
lane widths that you're crossing factor into it when you set it up. To some extent, the angle of approach, but the vertical aspect generally does not factor into the level of service. So this is when you're getting into projected levels of service versus actually measuring level of service in the field.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that teeing up.
Oh, that's interesting. So level of service is, so projected level of service is based on existing level of service.
It's based on your existing traffic counts that are then scaled based on what the proposed increase.
So
in
you
traffic-
start with the existing
traffic volumes.
and then extrapolate out from there.
Yes.
Okay. And so if it's a really bad intersection and if one car has to wait an excessive long time just because of the way the intersection is built, then that is
I put this
gonna
other TV on and put the channel I put on.
Hey, can you mute him? Thank you. So if it's a really bad intersection and cars have to wait a long time just because of the way it's built, then when you add more traffic to it, that's going to be factored into it. Just it's going to have to be. If you start with poor,
Not necessarily.
you're killing me.
Yeah, no. So when a synchro projection, which is how this one was done, it's based on the volumes. If you went out and actually measured the delay that cars are waiting, you calculated that out, that would be your current level of service. You can determine that from a different type of study that was done. So this study that was done it took the volumes, it put that into a computer program, and it's told you what the level of service is.
So it seems like we should actually have then not, we should have a study that actually looks at what's there now.
That's not typical procedure, but it's something the board could require.
Well,
That's not standard procedure for a traffic impact study. But
yeah, if this was somewhere in Florida, we got a nice big flat open space and you had a nice T intersection, I suppose using a computer model might work, but that's not what we have here. So it seems to me we absolutely should have a measured, I would think that that would be the recommendation.
It's hard to understand that that curve and that hill is not taken into account.
Right,
'Cause the
No,
sight-
exactly. I think that's
sight line
part of
on
the
that's
problem. There's
horrible,
the sight lines aren't
terrible.
good right now. And so as part of an engineered plan for what it should be, those sight lines would need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And then the sink
Fixed
row,
how? Level that hill, I mean, how do you fix that?
I don't,
potentially.
No.
are the sight lines bad as I'm thinking about it?
Well,
It's been a few years since
I mean, when
regularly
you're,
drove
when you're
that.
approaching there, especially if you're turning left, you know, right in front of the CVS, those shrubs, they are blocking the outer lane of the two lanes that are traveling towards you. It wasn't too bad when I looked at it in the winter or again today because there's no leaves on it. You can kind of see what's going on. I'm assuming though, when the leaves come onto it, it's going to be a lot worse. The other way where the grading, it's not as bad, but if you're pushing into that hill and you're building retaining walls, you need to ensure that you're going to be able to see over them sufficiently. And there's specific heights that need to be met. 3.5 feet is your set driver's eye level. 4 feet and change is the minimum for the height of a car. So those numbers are set by AASHTO as far as what sight distances you need, and so that is necessary to provide as part of that design.
I think we should have the actual numbers, because, you know, my recollection is it was more just the traffic that was coming down that was really the problem. It just took forever to get an opportunity to turn left, and not because necessarily because you couldn't see. Now I gotta, tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go drive it.
During rush hour,
I timed out
in the evening.
of the cars that were turning out of there, how long it was taking them for about a half hour I spent just timing out cars, and it was between 20 to 40 seconds, give or take, for left turns, 4 less for some of the right turns that weren't actual stops. But
What a surprise.
yeah. So it is, you know, a reasonable amount of delay at this point, but that would increase.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And that was 20 to 40 seconds per vehicle?
So from the time you stop to the time you go. So some of those were, you know, some people were second in line and they ended up waiting, you know, almost closer to a minute.
40 to 80.
But there was only one car approaching at a time, at least while I was there, which was a little past the peak hour, I'd say. So it could definitely be a bit more significant earlier on. But that was just some rough observations. That's not anything, you know.
I think that's useful though, because
Yeah.
I think that's real.
I think we need to get a real study of actual what's happening out there. So, yeah, I think that's going important. Okay.
So our next one, number 9, was the discussion of the traffic distribution. We stated last time that we would like to see journey to work data. That's an industry standard for verifying the distribution patterns. The response from the applicant's engineer was that would not be useful in this case. We believe it would be useful for verifying the distribution. So we continue to have that as a comment.
Okay.
And that's essentially determining, you know, how many vehicles are headed in which direction at each of the study intersections.
And Mr. Chair, I think this response kind of really bothered me because the entire response is speaking to whether or not the data that our consultant was putting more weight on was valid, and never once addressed the underlying concern that cars are going in directions, that a good number of the cars that are starting at 140 and heading up Snow Road are probably going home. They're probably not going through And so that's not necessarily indicative of anything more than there's going to be more people going home once this is built. To Peter's point, I think, there is some, reason to go down that way and go the full length, whether you're going to the train station or cutting through to Route 20, or Institute Road. But I don't, to have the entire response kind of focused on what data was used and not even considering the underlying point was a problem.
I second that comment.
Yep, so, we maintain our response that we'd like to see the distributions verified that way. Because again, like you were saying, it's not necessarily the same distribution pattern that exists now. It's a change in use, essentially. I mean, it's a larger style development than currently exists on the road. I know there's, one other development of some size, but not quite to this extent. So it's not necessarily the same residential, single-family traffic that this road is, that the current distribution patterns are built on.
Excuse me, if, Mr. Question, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to share with the board that I'm always an advocate. If there's two independent sources of information, that can be very helpful. They either corroborate each other or they lead to questions when they're quite different as to why it allows further investigation. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
So on to the next one, number 10. This was discussing the capacity analysis. We had requested more information about what was used to do the assessment. It was stated that Synchro was used. I think more specifically, where we just want to understand which methodologies were used. Synchro can do a variety of highway capacity manual methodologies, whether it's HCM6 or HCM 2000. There's different reasons to use different ones, and understanding which was used and why is helpful to, ensure accuracy. Generally we want to see HCM6, but HCM 2000 is more beneficial if you have, say, a pet exclusive phase at a signal. So there's like specific reasons why we'd like to see different ones. This is where we get into the queues a bit on Worcester Street with the shopping plaza impacts, and we did see in the queuing that was provided, they demonstrated that the queues shouldn't reach from the signal back to Snow Road, at least based on their analysis in that queuing. So we were able to verify that. And then looking at the turn lanes that we discussed previously. If there's any. Then number 11. That's the left turn lane warrant, again on Worcester Street on 122. We do believe that a formal left turn lane is preferred over the current striped gore area, which was referenced in the applicant's response. While yes, cars can pull into that area and very clearly do pull into that area, but having a formalized left turn lane improves driver expectation of what's happening in front of you. It clarifies to oncoming traffic what's going on, clarifies to vehicles that are passing what's going on. And again, that is part of Mass DOT's jurisdiction, so that would be something that should be included, but it would be up to Mass DOT for that to be included as part of the intersection improvements.
Mr. Chair, I think this was another one of the ones where it sounds like you guys might be more open to this than your consultant was. I personally am not comfortable relying on people breaking the law to solve the problem. So I'd prefer to see that as an actual lane too.
Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
Typically, in our experience with DOT, when you're in a permitting process, they don't want to look at anything until you have your approvals. Otherwise, everybody would be going to DOT saying, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And they'd be looking at a million things. Say, once you get your permits, come to us and you get your permitting through through DOT. In terms of having a redesign for the left turn lane on 140, in your experience, do you see other projects having conversations with DOT at this phase of the project, or?
Typically, generally, Mass DOT gets involved earlier, particularly when it's involves a MEPA filing. So outside of a MEPA filing, it's
don't
not
see
something I can look into that and
Okay.
get a better answer on that. Generally, when it involves a MEPA filing, that's when Mass DOT
Right.
is involved, to a significant level. And this,
Okay,
so
I
kind of a
would,
unique situation.
got ya,
I wouldn't call it a unique situation, but it's not one that I'm personally familiar with.
got ya.
Outside of that,
if the board decides that that's something that's going to be critical or is important, we could consider some sort of a condition that you successfully, complete that left turn lane. So, you may want to get a feeling for whether or not that's something you think you could do. I would think you could have some high-level conversations with MassDOT.
Right.
They may turn around and say, no, we'd never allow that for this reason or something along those lines.
Right.
But, it certainly could be something that becomes a condition. But as I said, with respect to the added lane on Snow Road, in my mind, it's something that would have to be done before CO, before the first CO. It's gotta get done.
Okay,
If we go in that direction.
yes. All right,
and I have been involved in projects where MassDOT has gotten involved well before any filing, any concepts have been included.
Right.
There's certainly ways to involve them and to get that dialogue started, and they can direct you with the right person
Got
to
it.
speak with.
okay.
Is the exclusive option there. So after that, we get into the site plan comments. That was the last one on the traffic study itself. So of the site plan comments, a good portion of them are that the applicant's team haven't provided a response.
Yep.
We didn't note in here, but there's one that we left out because it was addressed, which was to remove the parking spaces that were in the intersection in front of the clubhouse. But we can go through some of these other ones. I think a lot of these have been addressed as we've gone through things tonight. The fire truck turning templates that were used, we still have in here that we would want those confirmed by the Town of Grafton Fire Department, so we would defer to the fire department on that. A second means of access to the site, that was also brought up, but that has not been addressed and wasn't shown on the concept plan. Traffic control for the established intersections within the site, that wasn't shown on the concept plans, and that's something that you might not show on a concept plan. That's something that might come in a later, more detailed one. But we can certainly have a response saying that that will be included. The narrative about package deliveries and loading short-term delivery services, where those will occur, we don't have a formal response to that, or anything indicated on the plans. Waste removal. This one has been touched on a lot, and I want to reiterate one of the other aspects to it that was touched on a bit. Not just the trash truck going in, dumping, and backing out, but just going off of some standard, slower pedestrian travel rates. 3.5 feet per second is a standard rate that we use for crosswalks, things like that, to make sure there's sufficient time for someone to travel. So assuming someone who's a little bit, slower, potentially disabled, that's, you are looking at, upwards of a 4-minute walk from your front door to the trash compactor. So we do expect that there would be a lot of people traveling by car to this compactor location, whether it's to drop it off on their way out or because it's not a convenient walk. We don't have a particular issue with that necessarily, but the layout of it, where it's at a dead end, there's no place shown for vehicles to turn around. And if you're anticipating a queue of vehicles to drop off their trash, the car closest to the dumpster could, theoretically be blocked in, have nowhere to turn, and have to wiggle their way out to back down a line of other cars waiting to get to that trash. So the flow through that area, there is no flow to that one compactor spot. So whether that's moved or whether there's some sort of cul-de-sac included, some way for vehicles to get back out after they pull in there to unload their trash, is the traffic flow side of that. That was 18. Number 19, wayfinding signs. Those haven't been shown. That's another one similar to the intersection control within, where that might not be shown on a concept level, but would be, a written response would be helpful to establish that that will be included in full plan sets. Number 20, accessible connections to buildings 1 and 2, formerly buildings 3 and 4. We do want to see that. We want to see those appropriate crosswalks, sidewalks, and the different aspects. In that case, in particular, it's crosswalks where you're crossing 4 rows of parking stalls essentially, or 2 travel ways with those parking areas. Getting to those back buildings, there needs to be an accessible route. And not just those buildings, the trash compactor. Someone who's disabled needs to be able to get there. Pedestrian curb ramp details. Again, the details we would expect to be updated in a more robust submittal, or a comment noting that they would. Similar for 22, the crosswalk widths. We would want to see those updated. But we would also want to see those details included in future substantial ones, and follow-up comments to indicate that would happen.
Is there, sorry, can I chime in for a second? How about elevated crosswalks? Is that something that can be detailed in something like this, or is that not necessary?
I think you could show where you're intending to have raised crosswalks. You can quite literally put a couple of lines to show where the ramps would be for the vehicles to cross over. I think that's something you could show at this level. I think that's helpful for understanding, conceptually where the traffic would flow. And I believe that is,
23.
Yeah, as part of 23.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so 22 was the crosswalk widths, and 23 is the, potential for raised crosswalks or other pedestrian accessibility, whether it's, curb extensions where necessary. That might not be quite the right approach. I think raised crosswalks are more of a way to go with this type of situation. But just anything that could increase pedestrian safety. That's really what you want to look for. This isn't a high-speed area inside of this. It's not, an area where you'd use rapid flashing beacons necessarily. But the slower moving cars, there's often more distractions around. Your cars are backing in, backing out. So, anything to try and protect, increase the slow speed protection of pedestrians. And that's where, raised crosswalks, high visibility crosswalks as well, using, paint that's retroreflective, things like that can really improve the pedestrian safety, even though it's lower speeds to begin with. And then the last item on here, just the site triangles at the site driveway, sort of referencing back to those sight lines. We want to see the labels on there, and some additional notes, but that would be, that's not necessarily part of a conceptual plan, but we'd want to see that included as well.
Other questions or comments from the board with respect to, well, pretty much anything? We're about to go to public input. Yep.
Just on the crosswalk crossing Snow Road, did you have any comments on that in terms of the design? Because they're proposing a connection of the project's sidewalks to cross over to get to the sidewalk that's on the other side of Snow Road.
Is that included in the original? No, we don't have that Based on the speeds, I mean, you'd want to base sort of on the speeds for that, whether signs would be appropriate. Regardless of the speed, signs would be appropriate that have crosswalk with the arrows pointing down. Based on the speeds, given a 2-lane road, you could say potentially a rapid flashing beacon, but that's going to really depend. The Mass DOT has a step guide that really works you through what's appropriate at different speeds and different lane widths. So I think anything appropriate in there. You know, it's not a road where a center pedestrian refuge island would be really applicable.
So maybe it's a case of making note. I think that's something you want, because I think that was added in at some point. It wasn't in the original. So I think that's
One of these in one of the recent projects.
Pleasant Street.
Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
Pleasant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we have a beacon or something there? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I also had a
It's
question
a-
about Maxwell Drive.
Okay.
So Maxwell Drive is sort of, you know, it's offset from the project driveway, and isn't it more typical to have these intersection roads kind of aligned with each other? And would it be more beneficial for the project's intersection driveway to be basically opposite Maxwell Drive?
There's some benefit to that with traffic flow. It can help with for vehicles on Snow Road. It can make it a little bit more difficult for vehicles coming out of the new development and on Maxwell Drive, but it can help improve for Snow Road. With the volumes on this road, I don't know that it's necessary, but it could be beneficial.
I guess I was thinking that it may present a safety issue if cars are taking a left out of the project, and someone's on Maxwell Drive who wants to take a left. You know, they're both kind of taking a left at the same time. Does that create conflicts?
To an extent, I think the distance between them, and again, we go back to the speeds on the road. I don't think that would be, well, you wouldn't be getting into speeds at that point because you're talking about left turns. I think there's sufficient distance that's not likely a concern, but you could look more closely at that. If there's opportunity to move it in line with Maxwell Drive, it's a good opportunity to look at.
If I may weigh in on that, but it puts if it's a single entrance to the project, it puts the entrance that much closer to Worcester Street. If there were two entrances and one of them was aligned with Maxwell Drive, that would be a whole different scenario. I'd suggest that be careful of just painting it one way or the other, whether the number of entrances is very important.
Right, and keep in mind Maxwell Drive, that's really a driveway for the
Housing
the
authority.
housing authority, and that's like a
Low volume.
it's basically like a long horseshoe driveway.
Yeah, it's really not a road so much as it is a driveway.
So
But John, I
there's
think
nothing
it's
wrong with
something
aligning
worth.
those, but there's nothing wrong with aligning them, but it's not concerning where it is right now in relation to it to me.
It might be good if you could add that to your documentation, your report to us, so, you know, both a review of the sidewalk that's planned there and whether there should be an alignment or the location, the current location of the driveway with respect to Maxwell Drive. If you could just include that in your report to us, I think that would be appropriate.
So just to summarize, Bill, I think the action items we talked about tonight on traffic, you wanted to see like an actual observed observations of
Yep.
level of service at the intersection of Snow Road and 140. We want to see an actual plan showing the right turn lane, in accordance with the recommendations from John in his letter, 75 feet.
A detailed plan that could be reviewed and it could be peer reviewed.
It's showing whether it's going to be with sight lines, as John said, but also showing whether that require any kind of taking, eminent domain taking. We actually, I think on December 12th, asked for a feasibility analysis for realigning the intersection to make it more of a square, a 90 degree square. So that's still on our list. We talked about ETRs for the tubes for the 85th percentile speed. In those,
On those, located where?
they're typically located at the project driveway entrance, right?
Yep. So what you're generally looking for is the speed as cars are approaching the driveway. So, a little further north, and potentially one a little farther south if you wanted to do two of them. But what you're looking for is the speed as cars are approaching, so you know what speeds what speed they'll be coming at for a vehicle turning out of the road.
I thought we had talked about something for 122 also.
There were traffic counts that were already done there. There were turning movement counts.
Okay.
So those were done at the two study intersections where they were counting what vehicles took what turns. I believe it was a 12-hour count. That was in. I would have to double check the original study to see what was done for those.
But now it's just observation. That wasn't speeds. That wasn't. So it's essentially
Right.
the same thing that we got
Yes.
on Snow Road itself.
Yeah. So there were no speeds taken for 122.
And then we talked about getting crash data from the police department if they have any additional data at this intersection. And another issue that came up in December was whether to expand the study area to include Snow Road and East Street. Did you look at that question, or?
I did look into that. So I didn't see anything that would impact that intersection. There's very little crash history there. There was one in the time period. Driving through it, the sight lines were pretty well okay. It seemed like a low volume roads intersecting each other.
I think it was an issue about level of service, whether the project would increase level of service down there, since a lot of people go in that direction to go to work. Is that right?
The train station.
Train station in particular.
Yeah. It's something that can be included. That's not part of our recommendations, but it doesn't typically meet what you would include, but it could be as a requirement by the board. Certainly could be added.
Okay.
I forgot, there was something I wanted to share with the board. When I was reviewing the conceptual plan today, I said, we've got three different plans, the original fully engineered plan, the first conceptual, the second conceptual, different numbers of dwelling units, different number of parking spaces and so forth. So I prepared a spreadsheet, because I'm an engineer, and, what it does is it compares things such as total number of dwelling units, number of dwelling units in the 3-story buildings and the 4-story buildings, in the 4-plex townhouses that are no longer proposed, in the duplex townhouses. It looks at the parking ratio to compare back to the zoning bylaw, and it also looks at the density in dwelling units per acre. And I did that because there was that data on the fully engineered plans, and I just cautioned the board on dwelling units per acre. If you compare that with any other information and any regulations in this town or other towns, be careful. Dwelling units per acre of land on the lot versus dwelling units per developable acre of land are very different. So wetlands aren't developable and other easements, things like that. I was just trying to provide some data to help the board compare. And the other one I did compare is there is a requirement in the zoning bylaw for the residential multifamily for a certain number of square feet per dwelling unit, and that data is included here to let you compare the three versions of the plans with the zoning bylaw. And I don't want to talk any more about it. I think everyone's had enough with. You want them?
If you have spares.
But I made enough for all the board members.
Jeff, can you hand me mine?
I would, Peter, but it doesn't look like you. She's a lot cuter.
I wonder if you can see the picture.
Thank you.
I will leave one with Amber. Peter? Nobody was here, right?
No, that's Peter, Steve. Yep, thank you.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you. I think I've been in maybe one meeting with you.
All right, I think it's been good
Review
reference
on
material.
this. So we'll do a review on this.
There you go. Check them out, please. I did proof it, but there could be errors, and if
I'm
there
sure
are, I
it's perfect.
apologize. That's it. I'd rather not go into it anymore, but I'd be glad to
appreciate
answer questions if Katrina sends me any questions.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to open, to public input. Anyone in the room care to speak? Raise your hand, ma'am. Approach the, lectern and name and address for the record.
Lucy Beauregard, 31 Snow Road. I'm a little confused now. The townhouses are gonna face which direction? Snow Road or inside the development? Reason I'm asking is because if they're gonna be facing Snow Road, aren't we gonna have a traffic issue? Because now we're gonna have deliveries, mail, anything coming up from Snow Road, and instead of them going into the development, they're going to have to park onto the street in order to do other deliveries and whatever. So that may impact the traffic coming up Snow Road, let alone going down. And we have a problem already with the dead lane coming in from CVS and Stop and Shop to get onto Snow Road, where people just cut right in to get onto that one lane road on 140. So that's one
I think
thing.
it's a good question.
And then the other thing that I just, it's just me. What about EV accessibility for parking? Is there anything for the new Priuses, any new EV? Is it gonna be under garages? Are people gonna have to take their, I don't know, an extension cord to the 4th floor and, park
think
their
that-
car? I mean,
I think that's something that
anybody,
will come later with more detailed plans.
but it's also something for thought that I've never heard anybody mention anything about it. You also have all the backup stuff on that. And back in October, I had asked a question where I don't recall receiving any kind of answer, and that was on the schools. The impact, what will happen? Now, of course, it's been downsized, but a lot of the kids, especially the elementary kids, are going to be going to North Grafton Elementary School. And my understanding is that the building is old. My kids been there, and they're 40 years old now. And are there any plans on expanding it to accommodate the kids? Do we know how many it's going to impact potentially? I heard the roofing is about to collapse. Is there any thought about that getting fixed?
I think some of
Where's
that.
the budget's going to be
yeah.
coming from? I mean,
We wouldn't get into any of that, but, we do request comments from all the town boards and departments. I don't know that we've received anything from the school department and expressing any concern about.
well, again, and another concern that I have, I also drive a Prius. So if I'm going down Snow Road and I want to come down the end of Snow Road, even just to take a right, and I have a school bus or a big,
I agree. That's what I was.
I'm going to be blocked. No matter what, I'm still going to be blocked.
Yep, I agree.
And that's potentially really dangerous.
I agree.
So, thank you for your time, folks.
Somebody else? Yep. Sir, I'll get you next.
Hi, Allison Casella, 36 Snow Road. One of my biggest issues is definitely the traffic turning onto 122. I drive my son every day to school, as many of us in our neighborhoods all do. We all have to take a left-hand turn. I have almost gotten smoked there so many times, and the people are flying on 122. So adding a left-hand turn to get into Snow Road is going to make it that much harder to make a left-hand turn onto 122 because you can't see. And people aren't going to stop. I would suggest that we get a speed study on 122 to see how fast those cars are going, because I'll tell you right now, some of them are going at 50 miles an hour. Easy. So it is very dangerous. And many of us have kids. And guess what? They all have to take a left. That is a very dangerous turn as an experienced driver to take, let alone putting a 16, 17-year-old kid making that left-hand turn. I know a lot of people take a right-hand turn just to scoop around and go back up the street. It's ridiculous. So that has to be fixed, absolutely. making a right-hand turn there is going to make it even harder to make the left-hand turn because you can't see. Every morning I tell my son, sit back, I can't see. Sit back, I can't see. You have shrubs over here on CVS that need to come down. I just came here at 8 o'clock. It took me 1 minute to get out to make a left-hand turn at 8 o'clock at night. At 8 o'clock at night. That's because people are flying. Less traffic, they go faster. It's ridiculous. That has to be addressed, and I think someone said it, and I don't know who, but we need to see what's going to get fixed there, because I will tell you, accidents will increase. That point. The other way, I'm a runner. I have 2 dogs. I am on Snow Road every day. Everyone is going faster than 35 miles an hour. I will tell you that right now. There is no space, no side. The space you have is this big. I've almost gotten hit so many times. So we have to do something about that road going snow to east. If you drive east, go up to east. You have a sharp bend. There's no center line on that road. You have a really sharp bend. Anyone takes that too fast, there's going to be accidents. Now you have all this new development up on Institute, all those houses, all of those apartments, condos, whatever they are. Guess what? They're all coming our road to get to Stop and Shop. Yes, they're going to the train station or wherever, but to get to a grocery store, they're taking a left out of our road. Traffic has increased. Just with that development, let alone another one. Left-hand turn has to be taken care of. Other one was sidewalks. I've heard that we were doing that, but that road is so narrow on this side that we have to require sidewalks if you're going to have more people walking. Because I'm a walker and it's dangerous. So if you're going to add more people, forget about it. If you don't have a dog park, people are going to be walking their dogs and it's going to be a nightmare. Make sure they pick up their poop. And then I had some concerns about the school. I know you mentioned that they haven't commented. I'm going to actually submit a comment to them because I feel that it's extremely important that we start looking at what this is going to do to our schools. My kids are now moving into the middle school. However, you know, we're dealing with cuts in our school right now, losing teachers. Our class sizes are getting bigger and we're going to be putting in more kids into these schools. We're already, having trouble with our funding. So I really feel like we need to start looking at that potential. And I think I hit them all. Yes, I said speed on 122, right? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just while he's coming up, 2 quick things that I wanted to touch on that I forgot earlier. She raised the issue of the people turning right at Snow Road and potentially blocking the view of the people that are looking to turn left. Is that something that you specifically looked at to see the potential for this lane to make things worse?
Yeah, so part of what we would want to see in the design for that is it was mentioned that it was going to be teed up. That's going to help with that aspect of it. The other part, right turns, generally we're waiting 5 to 10 seconds and there were a lower volume of right turns. They'll generally be in and out fairly quickly in their own lane from what the data shows. So,
and then
from what I saw out there as well.
Just to clarify on that, I didn't have the impression that that the intersection was going to be more of a T.
To the extent that we can, we're gonna.
What's that mean? We don't.
If we can realign it, a little bit, and again without.
But I think until there's some indication that can happen, I think we assume that it can.
Right, I agree.
Well, again, that's why we're gonna, like I said, next on the list is doing that design for the right turn lane and getting that plan prepared.
So essentially that is dependent on what plan comes out. Mm-hmm. What plan is presented is going to really determine if this is helping or not.
If I may, the engineered plan of the intersection, consideration would be with the stopping lines. Given the angle of Snow Road to Worcester Street, if there were 2 lanes queuing on Snow Road at Worcester Street, the angle is such that the left lane, the vehicle could pull a little farther forward than the vehicle in the right lane, making the situation a little better than if it was a completely opposite situation, or even a 90-degree angle. Case in point, I've got an intersection I drive through, it's a 90-degree angle, and I'll tend to stay, I make a right, I tend to stay back a little bit when I can see through the window of the other car and just wait it out. But I think the angle of Snow Road here might actually be a benefit with respect to the two lanes and sight distance. I'm not sure that's what the.
Yeah, I think that's why
plans were.
we need a detailed design so that it can be looked at by the professionals and come up with that.
But on the flip side, that the person trying to take a right might have their sight view blocked by the guy on the left.
Right.
Yep.
If that car is
That's,
actually.
that's true, but they also have the traffic light there that creates a big block of traffic.
Right.
A big gap.
You're gonna
at
be able
one
to see
point.
to the left.
Agreed, whereas the vehicles taking a left don't have the benefit of the stoplight creating the gaps in traffic, yep.
Sir, go ahead.
Sorry about
I didn't mean to have you leave you standing.
I'm Robert Brian Bonner, 21 Snow Road. In general, I believe that this development is still too high. There are too many units per the buildable or developable acres based on the bylaws that I've read. I do appreciate the fact that the board was concerned with how the development looks from Snow Road, and to make sure it looks appealing and it fits in with the rest of the neighborhood. I would encourage the board to take a ride down Christmas Tree Lane and Suzanne Terrace and Frankie Lane and see how high the hill is behind the existing houses there and what a 4-story building is going to look like on top of that hill. So don't just think about Snow Road, which I appreciate, but there are a number of other neighborhoods and a couple other roads that are impacted. Thank you.
Whoever had their hand up over there will be next.
Joe Bisha, 8 Snow Road. If you don't think people are going to park in front of those townhouses facing Snow Road, you're crazy, because I can't get people to stop parking on the sidewalk and on the road in front of the housing authority. The no parking signs disappeared. I don't know where they went. I've called the authorities on one person because he thought his permanent parking spot was on the sidewalk across from my driveway where I back out with a giant oil stain on the sidewalk this big. I just wanted to ask you also, do you plan on taking my pine trees down? Because those I'm at 8 Snow Road, right? I bought the property.
Yep. I see exactly where you are.
Because nobody's come and asked me if they want.
If they're on your property.
Yeah.
They are on my property,
Then-
but their property, and it's right on the line.
Right.
But I would appreciate if you took them down if you get this, if you get this project through. And I also agree that the traffic is insane and people fly up and down Snow Road. And 122, with the 2 lanes come into one, there's people racing all the time to get in front of the other guy. It's a nightmare.
Yeah,
And that's about it, really.
It's a good point. I've mentioned that before, but the idea that there's a lane drop right at the point of this intersection is just makes it all that much crazier. So, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I think the project's big too, way too big.
Mark Potter, 14 Suzanne Terrace. So I can kind of echo what everyone on the board has brought up here as some concerns. We all feel that, the density, the traffic and stuff are things that we're concerned about. Living at 14 Suzanne Terrace, I will have a direct line of sight to a 4-story building that's at a 20 foot elevation of grade above where we live. So even with a privacy fence and what trees I have in my yard, I feel like I will lose some privacy in my backyard, front yard, and that sort of thing. I know there were some talks previously about a sidewalk up to Christmas Tree Lane. I do feel that will be beneficial for pet owners or anyone with kids at this development, because inherently they're probably not going to walk their dog around an apartment complex. Probably more likely to come over to our neighborhood, which is a dead end, perfect circle, and more than likely to happen. Also regarding the traffic study, not to pile on, but as far as future distribution patterns, UPS has already broken ground on their development at Centennial Drive. They are predicting 1,000 full-time employees. Whether they're now, if you want to say that a quarter of those people are going to take the train, that's fine. But everyone else is going to be taking the 90. All those trucks and delivery traffic is going to be coming off of the 90 in Grafton. It won't take people long to figure out that the 3140 intersection with that 3 sets of lights there is not the right way to go. They'll be cutting down Institute and East. So we will see some increased traffic for sure in the future. So if we're planning on bare minimums for this intersection on current studies, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should be thinking about what's the growth and development going to look like in the near future, because it's already happening. And also, I took a ride by the Howe Ave development. I mean, I think it's a nice looking development. As far as the playground goes, I don't have kids, but I don't see any one of the kids in our neighborhood using that playground. I think most of my neighbors have a bigger swing set in their backyard. So I don't know that that should be something that we're like, oh, this is a great thing for the neighborhood. We're going to have 3 swings and a slide. It doesn't seem like it's going to work out for everyone in that capacity. Another thing I just wanted to point out. So I reviewed some of the previous meetings, and I caught a zoning board meeting where we had a current resident that was applying for or trying to get a waiver for a shed, oversized, probably needed a building permit or whatever. And the comment from the board to that resident was, well, a waiver is asking permission to break the law. So we turned him away for his one waiver on a shed. And how many waivers are we at on the density of this development? I think it sets a bad precedent where you have a resident that is asking for a small waiver, a shed that's not probably going to affect his neighbor too negatively, versus the size of this development and what we're looking at currently. That's all. Thank you.
It's a really fair comment. And I'm the guy who more than likely said what you just
Maybe.
quoted. So, I'm sure I am, because I've said it many times, but just one thing to keep in mind, it is 2 different state laws that those things are operating under, and, the law that this is operating under is really intended to develop affordable housing. It's not, it's not necessarily in favor of the town. Now, we have a lot more power because we're in safe harbor, but, it's really, you want to make that comparison, but it really is apples and oranges, thanks to the state law, the way it's structured. Was there anyone else in the room that wanted to say something? Yes, ma'am.
It's on Zoom too, and I think one of them's gonna say something close to what I.
Well, I'll get to Zoom. I can see those hands up. We'll get there.
I'll let him do that then. 'Cause it's kinda cool.
Was that?
I can come up.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Wendy Allen, 8 Frankie Lane. So there's so many things, like I actually stopped writing them down. It's so frustrating. And I don't know how you guys do this, because like we're here, every couple of months or something, but like you're here all the time, volunteering your time. But these things keep coming up. The hydraulic fluid leaking, the right turn lane, which I have to say that again, like this came up before, and there was a whole conversation about how it's similar to like the GHS parking lot. Like if you can't see either way if someone's there, and that's pretty straight with just like a turn. This is worse and stuff. So like this has come up so many times, and I'm like, how are we still not at the like level where this was actually really looked at? Because there's just so many things that we keep talking about, and at what point do we be like, they're not even trying? It's so frustrating to me. And like I said, like you guys are volunteering your time like way more than we're sitting here. So I really thought like that there's so many people here from our neighborhood, because we were like, this is going to be it. We're going to get these answers. And there's so many that we're not getting that we've asked repeatedly. It's frustrating. So I feel for you guys, and I appreciate all the time you put into this. So there's a few things that like we already talked about. Yes, the parking on Snow Road happens all the time now. And I really think that like they need to drive this road more often when they're saying these things, like multiple times. Go on a weekend when people park there, go in the traffic and see what it's like. Because it's really bad. And then I had a question, I think this was brought up before, and I don't think that was super answered. This might be super far, but like, okay, so there's trash compactor. Don't love that, especially just one. But recycling, what are we doing for recycling?
They'll be recycling also.
Where?
2. There'll be one for each.
Okay. So it'll be, okay. And then, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that is still my concern is further on, like the rental pool. And then I'm pretty sure some of my neighbors are gonna talk about some of my other concerns, but, okay, thank you.
I think we're kind of frustrated as well, by the way, you know, we're at that point where we need to get in some details here.
I just got one more quick question.
Real quick.
Real quick. And it's for I don't know your name, but anyhow, how old is your studies? When are they from?
So,
How old are they?
So the applicant submitted a study, that I reviewed. So I didn't do the study, I just reviewed the study on behalf of the town.
Right, but you're referencing studies.
The original study, I believe the counts were conducted
2018 to 2022.
2022.
Yeah.
So a
Isn't
few
that
years
kind of
ago.
old? Yeah, during COVID, so that's not exactly
So I was just
fair or accurate for this project.
I was just the cross state. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, because there was discussion about the COVID factors that were involved in the first round of comments. That was actually comment 2, which we didn't include in our follow-up. Essentially, though, it was January 4th, 2023 was the date of it. So it was passed when MassDOT was requiring COVID factors. So this was beyond what MassDOT considered vehicle volumes to be impacted by COVID. But yes, January 4th, 2023, so about
It was very
2
light
years
back
ago.
in COVID. I mean, Mass Pike was great because I could open up my windows and sleep, no traffic. You know, and I can hear the traffic, even my windows closed even now. You know, so, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody can help us out? We start at the top and work your way down, maybe. So Timothy, I think you've been enabled. Maybe not.
He's muted.
Yeah, he looks like he's muted.
Right. How about now?
There you go.
All right. Tim Carragher, 25 Suzanne Terrace. Again, a lot of the concerns have already been brought up. The traffic being number one. As a direct abutter to the property, I'm worried about that I am at a lower grade than the projected project, which is a huge concern of damage to the pool in my yard and then flowing down into the basement. Also, if the project were to get approved, I'm really hoping that the development team works with the abutters directly, walks the property for sight lines. And, I know there's a ridge where I think now it's a proposed garage. It went from a townhouse to a parking space to a garage. But still, I think the concern of any parent with young kids is privacy, security, and having some sort of fence or something put up there if this project does go through is a huge concern of mine. And just want to make sure that that we're not forgetting. The scope of the project is so huge, but we're not forgetting about the small pieces of the people that already live in the surrounding neighborhoods. Because I think, we look at the big things, we look at the traffic, we look at the schools, we look at all those huge things. But, the day-to-day living of the neighbors and all the people in the area are going to be greatly impacted. And if this does happen to go through, I think, I hope the board, can somehow help us out to make sure that, we get protected as well with all these little things. Because, the worst thing I think that could happen is this project gets approved, things happen, and then all the neighbors are just forgotten about, and then there's damage and all those things. So there's the big concerns, but also I have to look out for my property, the neighborhood, and my family and all that. So I just want to make sure that that we're keeping that in mind as well as the big things that are on the table. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so to that point, we do have a lot of power to add conditions and things like that. And if there's things that you would like us to do to try to, as you say, protect, we can do that. And to add, have additional trees or landscaping or even to build a mound or something like that to kind of raise up more of a buffer, we can do we can request those sorts of things. Some of it may, not necessarily be seen until we get to more of a detailed design phase, but, so if there's anything particular that you or anyone else for that matter who's abutting this project or nearby, let us know, and we can try and get these things addressed. We have the ability to do that.
Mr. Chair, just a question for the applicant. I think we touched on this or it might have been the first meeting, but has there been any community outreach or any discussion with the butters since that first meeting?
No. No.
Yeah, so thank you, Rena. And that is something I really would like to see happen. All right, so I think there's been some real positive coming out of other 40B developments recently in town with outreach. Quite frankly, I wish the Affordable Housing Trust had made you do it when you first showed up here. I wish the selectmen had made you do it. It really should be something that's done. You should have a meeting with the neighbors on the site, walk the site. If you really are sincere about being a good neighbor, that should be part of it, in my opinion. And I think that really should happen. All right, next on, I guess would be Mr. Whitney.
Hello, I hope I got you.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. Richard Whitney, 13 Greeny Drive. First question I have is, did they submit all their traffic stuff that you guys wanted them to do at the last meeting?
No.
Okay, then why are we going on with this further? You said at the last meeting, you better come in with all your stuff. And we left it at that, and they were supposed to do Snow Road and East Street, and they were supposed to do Route 30 and 122. As you know, the road on Snow Road, and I probably letting it out of the bag, or everybody already knows it, it's being repaved in the next few weeks. So, and they are going to put, new pavement and you're going to realign this intersection. Now, who's going to pay for the repavement of that, and who's going to reimburse the town?
Well, they'll pay for any of that sort of work that needs to get done. They're going to be responsible for that.
Okay, and with the intersection, why don't they just do like UPS did, cough up the money and put a stoplight in, and DOT, excuse me, I'm sorry, I had a small stroke, and DOT gave them the green light to go ahead. So why don't they just do the same? And why don't we ask them, to close this and come back when they get ready to file everything right?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the process so far that we've been going through. Although patience is getting thin. As far as the traffic, I think it's kind of understood that that's too close to the traffic light at Stop and Shop. So I think that we're trying to do the next best thing. Whether that actually is successful or not remains to be seen. And this member's opinion, will very well possibly be a deciding factor. So, they're going to try and design an improved intersection there. Maybe they're successful, maybe they're not. And maybe I feel as if they will actually make the situation better. Maybe I don't. This member at least, and that will very possibly be a deciding factor of whether I vote to approve this. So I think we're letting them move forward with the next best thing, and we'll see what happens.
I just wanted to say this before I leave. The son of this builder built 2 houses right over the railroad tracks at 78 and 80 Worcester Snow Road. He was supposed to leave a clean site of 200 feet. Now they're going to repave this road. It's a dangerous coming out of Greeny Drive onto Snow Road if you take a left. So how do we know that this is going to be followed through if you guys decide what you want done? Are you going to have somebody there hand in hand with them? Because it shows that they can't do what they promised the town. And I've already yelled and screamed about it, but nobody, it's like on deaf ears. And Bill, I told you about it too.
Yep. So for the record, the ZBA is not going to have anyone there holding their hands. That's not our job. And you know, if it's up to the professional staff here in the building to make sure that permits and bylaws, et cetera, are followed. And I have no comment on, you know, if you're saying things that's falling on deaf ears. That's way beyond what this board gets involved in.
Okay. And the other thing is, with the density of this project, I see it has no merit of going on any further because they don't want to compromise coming down, and that's the least of it right there. But I thank you for letting me talk, and I all wish you a happy Easter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Sean Fullwood, I guess. Mr. Fullwood, you're on.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sean Fullwood, 22 Snow Road.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I guess a quick question. I've been tuning in. I've got school-aged kids. One of the big things we're dealing with in town is a shortfall in the budget of about $800,000 in revenue, and talking about upping the cost of green bags in town. With the trash contract for these developments, who holds those contracts?
That's up to with private apartments like that. That's all on them.
Right. So I guess my question is, for 268 units approximately for this development, right? You're looking at about $48,000 a year, and that's just one bag a month or one roll a month for each unit, and that's a loss of revenue. How can we expect as a town to make up that shortfall if we're allowing these communities to come in and then private contract out the trash, and then we're increasing the tax on residents that own or rent that don't live in these communities, and then say, hey, sorry, you're gonna have to pay $25 for a roll of 5 bags. And then second, I guess my comment is, I've been at these meetings for the last 6 months that we've been having these. I'm at 3 houses down from this, and I think it really goes to show the character. And I apologize if it's coming off as a character attack. But I'm having a hard time believing in sincerity of wanting to be partners in this town that I've brought up every single time that come knock on my door, talk to me about the park that you're putting in. Like I've got school age kids. I'm not going to walk them down to, the 3 houses down to go to a swing set and a slide. I've got that in my backyard. So again, come talk to me. The door's open. I'll invite you in for a cup of coffee, but nothing's happened. My doorbell hasn't rung yet. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. I think that's it for people who want to speak online. Any other thoughts or comments from the board?
Bill,
Yes.
well, we got the traffic engineer and Jeff here, and I know we've covered this before, but what are their thoughts on all the traffic going into this project going by the duplexes?
As far as once it's in the site, going past the duplexes?
I think that's what he's asking for. So, anybody who lives in the apartments basically comes in the driveway and they have to go left or right, which makes them driving right by the driveways of the duplexes.
It's a concern for the developer, as far as, making that sell to someone who wants to live in those duplexes. That's, effectively, that is less than the traffic you're going to see on Snow Road, because there's other traffic on Snow Road going past it. So it's really not more of an impact to those duplexes than it is to any other house on Snow Road.
All right, and if I may, we talked at the meeting I was here about the possibility of two entrances and not putting the vehicles, the on-site vehicles, the heavy traffic loads, if you will, by the end of the driveways on the duplexes. In my opinion, it's worth exploring the two entrances. I don't know if there's vertical alignment issues with Snow Road, especially on the entrance that would be opposite Maxwell Drive. There may be issues with headlight glare on house at number 15, but already the proposed driveway at the house at number 13 is directly across the street from that building and those two dwellings. So it's, again, it plays back into the conceptual plans and looking at it and looking at the benefits and being able to look at multiple major changes in the layout, not minor tweaks to the layout, to really, we call it paper dolls in our office once in a while to try to figure out what works and what doesn't.
And in our comments too, we also commented on having a second entrance. That was more as a safety concern perspective, but that is, a note that was in there that hasn't been addressed.
Bill, I don't know if Peter was referring to the concern that the cars that are in the driveways of the townhouse units are going to have to back into the main driveway for the 263 units. I think I raised that.
That's part of it, yeah. That certainly is part of it, yeah.
That doesn't seem to be desirable at all. And that's why I thought that really, as from a design perspective, it doesn't make any sense. You don't want people backing out into a busy road.
Sure.
And during the peak hour in the morning and the afternoon, there's going to be a lot of traffic. All the apartment unit renters are going to be coming past these townhouse units.
Yep. And
You're absolutely right. I remember bringing up the two entrances.
Right.
Yep.
And actually, you look at this, you'd lose the duplex towards Worcester Street, and you'd lose probably the other one, but you could maybe squeeze them in the middle where the entrance is now. So at the most, you'd lose one duplex. That's it.
I agree, Peter. And it takes all that traffic and it's no longer conflicting with the vehicles coming in and out of the duplex driveways. And you get redundant access for emergency purposes.
Just get rid of the duplexes. Seriously, and make a really nice buffer on Snow Road.
Okay.
All right, anyone else? So we need to talk about, a continuation. I do have a document, a consent to extend. Now, Katrina had written this up, Dan, so that, James Venacasa was signing it, but neither Venacasa's here. So how do we handle that?
The engineer can sign it as the agent for the developer. That's fine.
Okay, all right. And I mean, Steve's on the phone. I mean, I assume that there's an agreement to extend. This is actually saying, from May 1 to June 1. I guess the next question is, how much time do you need before to design that intersection and, give our peer review a chance to look at it, that sort of thing?
We can have I'm trying to be realistic. We could have everything done in terms of on our side in a few weeks, but then you need some time to look at it. Are you meeting every other week or once a month?
No, we meet as needed.
As needed. So, if I had a few weeks to do it, and then they had a few weeks to review it. But I also need to talk to our traffic engineer about, and let's just concentrate on the intersection now. So,
Yep.
Because I think that's the hottest topic. So if we set a month or so.
Why don't you give yourself 5 weeks, John?
Okay.
Yeah. Don't you need to survey the intersection?
We already did.
You've done the intersection of Snow Road and 122?
Yeah, we went all of Snow Road and the intersection, and then down to Stop and Shop. We had a full detailed survey with, we had to pick up every utility pole, everything.
So 5 weeks, today's the 17th. 5 weeks would bring you out to May 22nd.
Sounds reasonable.
I'm good with that.
How does the board feel about May 22nd?
I'm out of town that week.
Have you done them all yet?
No.
How does everyone else feel about May 22nd?
I'm fine.
Because I'm gone the 29th and the 5th. So, and I've done them all.
Yeah, so I could do a Mullen.
That's fine with me.
I'll be remote.
That should be okay. All right, then let's shoot for the 22nd. All right, and the consent to extend goes out to June 1st. So I need you to sign this, and then if you would just print your name and
Agent for owner.
agent, something like that underneath here, that'd be great. And we have Mr. Vinicasa on record as saying that 20 seconds okay. And Mr. Vinicasa, you're okay with the extending to the deadline by 30 days?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, I'd entertain a motion to continue case number, whatever this is.
910. No,
Case 910?
yeah, 910.
Case 910 to May 22nd at 7 PM.
So moved.
Second.
I guess we gotta do roll call. Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
now who else is voting on this or not voting? So Mr. Mayor? Yes?
Yes.
Waller?
Yes.
And, Mr. McCusker votes yes. You gotta sign it.
Oh, jeez.
Didn't see the accent.
No. All right, so we're continued to the 22nd. Just before I hand back, because it's 40B, we're going to basically table the approval of the CMP for Pleasant Street. They're going to try and do the construction meeting first. So that on the agenda we're not going to do. And then I'll hand it back to CMP for Pleasant Street and Upton Street. So basically both of those items. So then I'll hand it back to Chairman.
All right. So we need to pick another date for sometime in June for 9 Logan Path.
Did earn a living, huh?
So like I said, I'm gone 29 and 5, 29 May and 5th of June. So
June 12th.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, good night, thank you.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Dan.
Guys.
Night.
Good night, Jen.
Thank you. June 12th.
Yep, that works for me.
Peter, June 12th.
Excuse me?
Take care, Ken. Take care.
June 12th.
For our next meeting for 48 cases?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think I'm fine.
Okay. So can I have a motion
Wait, June 12th.
to continue case number 906 for 9 Logan Path to June 12th?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Mejia.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Do we need to do something with 77 Worcester?
Yeah, didn't we push two from last week?
I think we need to,
So they're withdrawing.
so we need to allow them to withdraw without prejudice. So I move, we allow case 913 to withdraw without prejudice.
Second.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mejia.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes, so case 913 is withdrawn without prejudice. Now is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm just gonna quickly check our cheat sheet here.
So moved.
Second.
We're good.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Mejia,
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. We're adjourned.